The 14th of December.
Maybe we get it. Okay.
That's how it gets, guys. They probably has the 3,400.
Let me go get some more.
Yes, oh, Joe?
What was that?
Pardon?
Oh.
Yeah, I'm gonna send it to call number.
All right.
Thank you for tuning in.
Okay.
That is the decision. So she should just opportunity.
I guess I should listen to what you said. Yes, at the December 14th meeting of the Marijuana Rules Advisory Committee. We are, RAC members are being seated. We have several RAC members on the phone. So as they sort of get situated, I'll just go through the introduction that we did last week, because we might have people who are joining us for the first time. And just to orient you as far as what we're doing, sort of with these RAC meetings, what we're doing in general. So convening a Rules Advisory Committee is the first part of the rulemaking process in Oregon. Administrative rules like the ones we will discuss today are adopted by agencies in response to laws that are passed by the legislature. So rules are typically how agencies operationalize their statutes that are adopted by the lawmakers. As I mentioned, the Rules Advisory Committee, like the one we have today, is the first step in the rulemaking process. Rules Advisory Committees are comprised of community members and parties impacted by proposed regulations and are convened to provide advice to the agency as we develop the administrative rules that will operationalize the statutes. The way this committee has been running, Oregon Health Authority and Department of Justice have been presenting proposed sets of rules, getting feedback from committee members during the meeting, and then coming back to discuss changes and edits at the next meeting as a result of those discussions. Rules Advisory Committees are advisory to the agency. The committee will not vote, for example. Additionally, while these meetings are open to the public, the meetings are not public meetings, and therefore participation is limited to committee members only. We have set aside time at each meeting for public comment, since we believe that the constructive public comment and input aids in the Rules Advisory Committee process, and it aids the agency in crafting the most informed rules possible. We have posted a presentation that will provide that we provided at our first meeting. We'll make sure that there's a copy of that on the Rules Advisory Committee website. So at the first meeting, our Rules Advisory Committee lead went through the entire process. So we'll make sure that that's on our website so that folks can look at this in more detail. Typically, Rules Advisory Committees are seated on an ad hoc basis and meet for a very specific rule or set of rules, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 meetings. However, because of the interrelated nature of the marijuana rules the Public Health Division is considering, we thought it was important to seek one committee that will meet to help us consider all of our rules. As you will hear, committee members include members who represent Growsites, processors, dispensaries, medical card holders, laboratories, public health departments, poison control, physicians, academia, and members of the public. After we complete this process, the Rules Advisory process on each set of rules, The agency will move to make the rules permanent, which will include filing notice with the Secretary of State's office and scheduling public hearings. These public hearings are the formal opportunity for members of the public to provide comments on the rules. Any changes that are made after we file with the Secretary of State's office can only be made as a result of comments that are received during the public comment period at the hearings that are scheduled. Now I will take a roll, since we've got a lot of people on the phone, and ask each member to introduce yourself and provide the organization and or type of position that you represent, then we'll review the agenda. So my name, by the way, is Michael Tynan. I'm the Policy Director for the Public Health Division. John Bays. John, are you on the phone?
Yes, I am on the phone. This is John Bays with Green Bodie and Calyx's.
Great. Robert Blake. Okay, so Robert might be calling in late. Okay, so we hear a beep. We'll make sure to get that. Dr. Greg Blaschke. He is trying to call in as well, we hope. Is that right, Paul? We hope he will call in? We think so. Okay. Les Helgeson.
Green Hills and Open Enterprises.
Great, thanks, Les. Dr. Hendrickson.
Rob Henderson, Oregon Planning Center.
Great. Melody Holmes.
Melody Holmes, Wireless Class Science.
Great. Timothy James.
Can't get out for the public.
Great. Debbie Kaufman.
Debbie Kaufman, Oregon State University.
Dr. Lewis.
Paul Lewis, Oregon Public Health Officer Caucus.
Great. Deanne Mansfeld.
I'm on the phone. This is Deanne, Union County Public Health Department.
Great. Amy Margolis.
Amy Margolis, Emerge Law Group and Oregon Cannabis Association.
Dave McNichol.
David McNichol, Dave Space Cakes, and Oregon Responsible Edibles Council.
Jeremy Sackett. Cheryl Smith.
Cheryl Smith, Chair of the Advisory Committee on Medical Marijuana.
Hi, Cheryl. And Scott Winkless. Okay, hopefully Scott will join us a little bit later. Great, and then staff.
My name is Rosa Klein. I'm the Legislative Coordinator for the Public Health Division of the Health Authority.
Shannon O'Fallon with the Oregon Department of Justice.
Try that again.
Shannon O'Fallon, Oregon Department of Justice.
Okay, great. And we'll try to use the microphones so that folks in the room and folks on the phone can hear us. Folks on the phone, are you picking me up okay?
Yes.
Okay. And we'll make sure to leave a mic by us as well. So some housekeeping, since we've got a pretty big meeting today. So you notice we've moved into the big room. We've opened up here so that we could have as much space as possible. Restrooms are on the other side of the elevator banks. So you go out the hall, elevator banks onto the right. There's water in the cafeteria, out the doors to the left. We also, as OHA protocol, whenever we have a very large meeting, we open up both rooms. We have a security in the back in case anyone has any issues or concerns. And are there any other housekeeping items? I think that might be it. So we'll have public comment. Go ahead. Right, and if folks want to send written comment as opposed to making verbal comment, I'll give this email address again at the end. It's publichealth.rules@state.or.us. So publichealth, one word, .rules@state.or.us.
I hope you copied that.
So
down
our,
on a piece of paper.
Our agenda today is we're going to do the final review of the Dispensary, Growsite, Processor, and Cardholder rules that we've been discussing over the past month. We'll go through the grower and processor fees that are now included in the in the rule, and then we'll take one last pass at the statement of need of fiscal impact. And then hopefully what that means is that our next step is that we'll move to make these rules permanent. We'll take a quick break, and then we will have a discussion on laboratory testing. So we want to discuss both the temporary rules that were filed in November that are in effect until July that we need to make permanent. And then we also want to talk about this proposal that's brought up about the filling the gap between today and when those new rules take effect. I'm sorry, I said July. Those new rules take effect in June. After that discussion, we want to then have our initial discussion of labeling and serving size. And again, these are the rules that were issued on a temporary basis in November. We need to make them permanent. And we're on a different timeline than we've been in the past. So we've been working at a very fast pace because the Dispensary, Growsite, Processor, and Cardholder rules had a very hard timeline that we had to meet. With the lab testing, the labeling, and the serving size, those rules have already been issued on a temporary basis. They're already going to be in effect basically unless we change them from January 1st through June. And so we've got a little bit more room to be a little bit more deliberative. We don't have to be on this week-to-week, 4-hour meetings every Monday. So we've scheduled the next meeting until January 11th. So the balance is, we don't want to drag this out, and we also want to give the regulated community enough time to react, but we also want to have a thoughtful conversation and be able to respond to any comments that you bring up. So with that, I'll turn it over to Shannon, and we'll walk through the first item on our agenda.
All right, so good morning, everyone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the highlighted portions of the rules that you have before you, sort of the big packet of rules, Division 8. If there are things that you want to discuss on other pages that I'm not going over, just raise your hand and we can go through that. So page 1, the definition of advertising, I changed it a little bit to make it clear that the advertising provisions in the rules apply to medical marijuana producers, as that's defined, as well as processing sites and dispensaries. So again, just to make it clear who the advertising rule applies to. All right, skipping ahead to page 8. The application rule that talks about patients designating caregivers was again just clarified to take into account the new provisions in Senate Bill 844 about patients being able to designate an additional caregiver that is an organization. So that's the first highlighted section there. And then that 3 little d is just language that was added around Growsite registration fees. So if you are a person responsible for marijuana grow site, unless you're just a patient growing for yourself, you're going to have to pay the Growsite registration fee. And then on page 9, that registration fee is proposed to be set at $200. And I think I'll go through all these changes and then we'll circle back for sort of a broader fee discussion. All right, moving ahead to page 12. Again, this is just housekeeping thing. If you're, if it's at a time other than when a patient is applying, or if there's a change of a grow site location or a grower, then a fee is going to be due, again, unless you're just a patient growing for yourself. Page 26, monitoring investigation. This is just a change based on a suggestion, I think, from Les, to make it consistent with some other language about investigations, that the authority may investigate if it has a reasonable basis for believing that there is a violation that's occurring. And on page 29, this provision was added, general powers. This is straight out of language from House Bill 3400 that just gives the authority, the Oregon Health Authority, the authority to possess, use, or dispose of marijuana as is necessary to ensure compliance with the provisions of the Medical Marijuana Act and rules adopted under those provisions. So skipping ahead to page 40, yeah.
Can you go back to page 21?
Sure.
At the top of the Growsite plan limits.
Yes.
It says that PRMG may not produce more than 6 plants per patient. Now, PMRG, I assume, is you can only have 4 patients, correct?
Right.
So that's 24 plants maximum. Yet in B, he says you can have 48 mature plants.
that's the number of plants that can be at an address. You could have more than one grower registered at the same address.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so page 40, testing, and there's another, at the same time that I go over this, I want to go over,
Shannon, I'm
yeah.
sorry. Back on that same page, I
Yeah.
noticed in, under 0570, that the last section, it says that the authority can suspend or revoke the registration of a grow site address for all producers producing at that grow site, and in relation to any one violation of someone at the grow site. So that means that there's gonna be some innocent people at the grow site who didn't do anything wrong and they lose their license. Is that correct?
So in the way that 0570, again, this is page 21, is structured, is it states that growers are supposed to designate which plants are theirs at the grow site, and that is to deal just with the question that you're talking about, to make sure that if there are violations, if the plant counts are exceeded, then the authority sort of knows who's the person that violates. But if there are plants at the grow site that are not designated by a grower, then the authority is going to hold everyone equally responsible.
I don't know if that's fair to the person who is following the rules, and it's not fair to the patients of that grower too. If he's following the rules and doing everything right, why is his license being lifted? Why is the patient denied the medication when everything is fine with that grower? Doesn't seem as fair.
Right, so I mean, this is the difficulty, I think, with having a structure where, you know, you don't have sort of a person or persons that ultimately, you know, have to take responsibility for what happens at the grow site address. I mean, if you have an alternative way to do this.
One way it would be is like you inferred, is that someone is in charge of the grow site address. And if there's something goes wrong at the grow site address that you can't pin on any one person, then that person who owns the grow site address should have his license lifted, not somebody who is following the rules.
I just don't think under the current statutory structure that that is possible right now.
Well, could we at least have the ability to rely on due process before, if I'm an innocent grower, can I at least have some due process administrative action to protect my rights? So I can come in and say, I did everything right, I didn't know what those guys are doing, but I did it right, I should have my license lifted.
If you are a medical marijuana producer, you will get a contested case hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, anything else on that section? Okay. Okay, so you should have in your packet a one pager that has sort of some green highlighting at the top that says test results 3330089,000 test results. So I want to discuss that in conjunction with the testing rule on page 40 and 41. Well, 40, 41, and 42. So, you know, bear with me because this is sort of confusing. So, you know, there are testing rules that are in place right now, and there's been some discussion at previous MRAC meetings that perhaps that testing is not that meaningful. The Oregon Health Authority does not have jurisdiction over the labs that are doing the testing right now, and in particular, the way that that the testing rule is crafted around pesticides and what is getting tested for. Again, you know, you have a wide variety of results that are being produced, and you know, labs that are doing testing in different ways. So, starting in March, when this big packet of rules is going to go into place, the current testing language that in the statute that says you have to test for pesticides, mold, and mildew, that provision is no longer going to be in effect. OHA has temporary testing rules that go into effect in January. but those are not going to be enforceable until June. So you're going to have products in medical marijuana dispensaries that are not necessarily going to be tested in accordance with the new standards until June. So between sort of now and June, the Oregon Health Authority is looking at trying to do something that would make the testing that happens in the interim a little bit more meaningful. And rather than sort of change what's going to be tested for, the health authority is contemplating requiring sort of more robust test results so that dispensaries and other folks that are having testing done are a little bit clearer about what the labs are doing, and the testing results would require a lab to be a little bit more transparent and affirmative about the testing standards that they're using. So what we're proposing is that this 333-008-9000 rule would go into effect for the month of February. It would get filed as a temporary rule probably sometime in January. It would allow folks a little bit of time to meet the new standard. So the temporary rule would go into effect in February, and then starting in March, when the larger packet of rules is effective, then those same standards will be in effect in Division 8 until June, when the new testing provisions are enforceable, in which case we'll rely on the testing rules that are in Division 7. So the highlighted changes in the testing rules are, again, really what is required to be recorded on the test results. Test results have to comply with certain lab standards that are called the TNI standards. They have to report levels of THC and CBD that are calculated in accordance with the new testing rules, so that there would be hopefully some standardization with regard to that. And then the lab is going to have to report each pesticide analyte that was tested for, and the limit of quantification, so the level at which that pesticide was detected. In addition, OHA is proposing that before a dispensary can accept test results, either itself or from a third party, that the lab is going to have to send in its quality manual again, which would be sort of another layer trying to ensure that the lab that is doing the testing is doing it correctly and has the proper procedures in place. So with that, questions?
Do you have authority to approve these operating procedures and so forth?
Is your mic turned on?
Do you have authority to approve these operating procedures and so forth, standards?
So the manual isn't being requested because OHA is going to be approving it. But, you know, if a lab is doing its job, it's going to have a manual. If they don't have a manual, then a dispensary shouldn't be, or growers, or whoever's having testing done, shouldn't be using that laboratory. And we've heard from labs that there's some concern about proprietary information, you know, in the quality manuals. I think OHA is still debating whether or not that particular provision is going to remain in the rule.
So this is just something the labs will come up with without, will they be reviewing it with the health authority, or?
These manuals would not be reviewed by the Oregon Health Authority other than just whether or not it exists or not. Now, please.
Are we ready to dive into this?
I think so.
So it does, so three things. It does say if the authority determines that a laboratory is not using valid testing methodologies, presumably that can be dependent to some degree on OHA review of the quality manual.
You're right, it could. But OHA is not going to be approving the manual, but right.
But they can be using their judgment about it.
Yeah.
So, as you know, I think this is great and important. There's two problems with it that I see. One is the quality manual thing that the labs have raised about public release of their quality manuals is, it's a huge issue. It has to be solved. I mean, not only does it release proprietary information for the labs, but it potentially makes good quality manuals available to everyone who doesn't have one. So it actually undercuts the purpose of the rule. I find it hard to believe that there's not some sort of simple trick that could be used to compel laboratories to provide quality manuals to the OHA, or I know that the OHA doesn't have authority over the labs, but what you're relying on here is that customers of the labs have some ability to compel the labs to produce a QM. So some way to finesse this issue would be to have the customers of the labs compel the lab to provide the QM to the OHA. And I mean, there must be a way like that that works. But if the QMs go out into the public, everything falls apart. But I do think that giving up on letting the OHA see the quality manuals would be a mistake. I just think there's a way that we can make it so that only the OHA sees them. And then the other issue is that this language is built around a person responsible for a dispensary being in charge of sort of forcing a lab to do some things. Dispensaries don't do the testing now. Growers do the testing. So dispensary owners, people come into them with batches of cannabis, growers, that the growers have obtained test results for. So really the growers are the customer of the laboratory. Very few dispensaries do their own testing. So in the places here where it says PRD, it might be that a PRD obtains this information from the lab through the grower who is the customer of the lab. And the PRD definitely has to have the test results, and the test results have to have all these things. But for instance, if you want to do what I was just talking about and have the customer of the lab compel the lab to give their QM to the OHA, then that customer would not be the PRD, it would be the grower.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Scott.
Shannon?
Let's hold on one second. Yeah. Your mic.
Just
I guess I'm just lucky because I also get to sit on that public records work group, and my understanding is that proprietary data, and there's somewhere in 192 where that's exemption to release. So I don't know where don't think we're going to see this stuff going to the public. I think the OHA would actually be prohibited from releasing anything that was of a proprietary nature.
I think the way the rule is structured now, though, that the QM would go to dispensaries and wouldn't be in the hands of the Oregon Health Authority. So that's the concern.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
You would think it would be in both dispensaries and OHA, hence my previous question about approval or authority. This kind of gets back to, a comparison. You know, my wife used to work in the savings and loan industry where they got gobbled up. And she likes to say they were competing on service. So I'd like to take issue with this proprietary information stuff. These are standards specified. We should all be on the same page. What's so proprietary about it? In fact, I would go so far as to say that I would prefer most of these analytes, particularly with pesticides, to be tested for by the Department of Ag, or in conjunction, some sort of relationship with the Department of Ag. We have further questions to go over later, presumably. But I just, this proprietary stuff, these tests are tests, and we don't want somebody, withholding information because it's proprietary. I think we should all be using standard methods that are accepted.
Okay, so Jeremy, I know you might want to respond, but hold on 1 second. Hold on 1 second on the phone. Paul, did you have something?
Okay.
Why don't you and me, the person on the phone, talk first? I have a slightly related thing I'll just mention is that given the concerns that Mowgli raised,
do we have an example, for example, from water quality testing, where again, it's done by private labs, that is there a degree of sort of certification and proprietariness that's allowed, you know, do we already have a mechanism within public health around laboratories for this topic that we could look to?
I mean, the issue is sort of going to disappear after labs are accredited. It's just sort of this interim time period where the Oregon Health Authority doesn't have jurisdiction over the labs that are doing the testing, where, you know, and Shannon Swantek, you know, I mean, quality manuals will certainly be, once labs are accredited, will certainly be something that that OHA absolutely has the right to review. And I don't know if approve is the right word, but it's just sort of this gray area. So, and I don't know, John, if that was you on the phone, I'm going to let Jeremy respond, and then I'll turn to you. There you go, you're on.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Okay. So I agree that this is an issue, and I think that what has currently been drafted in this interim solution is putting us many steps in the right direction. My only issue with what has been drafted here is the public release of the quality manual to not a client, but just to a general dispensary. Overall, I'll frame the issue a little bit more so and give some justification why that is an issue. In my opinion, I feel that there's 3 key components for any interim solution for pesticide before we get to June 1st. And I've taken some notes and I can pass you, I printed out like 10 copies of these thoughts. A traceable and regulated supply chain for number 1. Number 2 is accredited laboratories. And number 3 is a target contaminant list in rule for all the products being tested. Those 3 points are broad generalizations that probably have a lot of other specifics within that. As far as the traceable and regulated supply chain, the many rules that are coming into effect over the next 6 months will address that issue. In the interim, I believe that an interim solution possibly could be some statement of compliance from a producer and processor that is transferring a product into the dispensaries. That statement of compliance would be an official OHA document identifying the producer processor, and a statement that statement is submitted to the dispensary with the batch that producer or processor states that they have complied with the batch not being transferred, and the test results represent that batch. Potentially through OHA audit testing or other investigational findings. If a producer processor were to make that claim and affirmation and were to be found not complying to that within future licensing processes, that could be a negative finding for that OHA or OLCC licensing. For the accredited laboratories piece, we do have a rule that's coming into effect the 1st of June. I'm wondering when the authority for OHA goes into effect for laboratories. Is that January 1st? Because of the testing rules becoming effective January 1st, although they're not effective until June 1st, does OHA, when is that OHA or lab authority over laboratories come into place? And I don't know if that's a question that needs to be answered right now, but moving into a couple of the second pieces that we could do for this interim solution is have the quality manual supplied to ORLAB as part of the application process that every laboratory is going to have to go through to become accredited as of June 1st. That quality manual is supplied to ORLAB now with an effective date as of February 1st. Any laboratory providing compliance testing between February 1st or January 1st, whenever, and June 1st must have a quality manual submitted to ORLAB. ORLAB can do and this will depend on if ORLAB can manage this, a preliminary review of the quality manual to ensure that there's no major findings. And then they could supply the compliance division of OHA with a list of laboratories that have submitted the quality manual to the inspectors that are inspecting dispensaries. Again, all of these solutions will not take contaminated product out of the market that is there right now, but what they will do is continue to add documentation and affirmation for folks that are complying with regulations that they are meeting to the best of their ability. the current regulations. So along with that submission of the quality manual to ORLAP, there could also be a statement of compliance, laboratory statement of compliance that is submitted to ORLAP from the laboratory that would outline which of the pesticides are being tested, which class they fit, and what the status of their validated method is. Make that effective potentially February 1st. The target contaminant list is something that will come into effect June 1st. I think that the reporting requirement that all certificates require the list is also a good interim solution that has been, written up in these rules. And sorry, I could, chat more or go into more details. I do have some statements printed and also just some other things that I can submit to the group.
So we need to try to get through the changes to these rules by 10. So, and we're gonna have, we're gonna be talking about the full testing rule a little bit later. Can you just make sure, Jeremy, that I get a copy of those notes? And so, is there somebody on the phone that had something to say?
Well, I think Jeremy pretty much covered it all, to be honest. This is John Bodie. I am really concerned about everyone's intellectual property being confidential. So I want to I'm really a proponent of making sure all of lab's IP stays confidential to lab, because there is minor differences in there, and all of that. So I do want to secure that for all of them and make sure that's in line. So it seems like what Jeremy is proposing seems about as thorough from my perspective as anything I could suggest. So that's my point of view.
Okay. Does anyone else on the phone have anything they want to add?
Let's say one more.
Okay. Yeah. Natalie.
So what Jeremy there were a bunch of good ideas in what Jeremy just suggested. One of them was that in addition to this, you have growers certify that they are really providing the correct results for that batch. That's a simple thing to implement and would be pretty effective, because that's a big point of concern that we haven't addressed in here. You could also have them certify that they did random sampling. There's no enforcement right now, but it's the kind of data it'd be good to collect in the future when you're looking at licensing. As far as the QMs again, Jeremy was suggesting another way to get the QMs transferred to OHA by having ORLAP do it. My guess is that, and I think that would be great, but my guess is that ORLAP will say that because of various TNO standards, they're not in a position to rule on the quality manuals early on. I don't know, but one thing that would be really simple would be just have growers compel labs to put on the test results. We are a lab that is providing its QM to the OHA. Have that be a validatable.
Can folks on the phone mute, please? John, I think you might need to mute. Hey, John, I think you might need to mute.
Sorry about that. I got disconnected and then I
No worries. Go ahead.
realized that I was on mute. Sorry.
Yeah, there are a number of good suggestions. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, so we've got some time to talk through this during our 10:10 to 10:45 session. The rules with the green on the top, this is something we're trying to take, we're taking this seriously, and we want to find something that balances protecting patients, and it's also fair to the industry. So, go ahead, Les.
Just briefly, how is that integrating with the green part, with the yellow part?
Right, so the rule that's labeled 9,000, 33308 9,000, this would be a temporary rule that is read in conjunction with the existing 33308 1190, the testing rule, right? Because the testing rule that's on the books right now isn't going to change until March, so this larger packet goes into place. And then this will go away in March. The 9,000 will go away in March, and you'll just have what is in this larger packet, the new 1190 rule.
Okay, so this yellow is the new 1190.
Right. Okay. Paul, did you have something?
I'm just challenged by all the days.
Yeah.
I think I get the January to June part. I don't get the March part, but if it's not relevant, you don't have to explain that again. Now is the gap shrink to March to June then?
There's a gap between now and March, and then there's still a gap from March to June. Yeah. I know.
Do the gaps get smaller? I mean, does the amount of stuff in does the content lack and the gap shrink? I mean, it feels like we're trying to move, as Jeremy says, in steps toward accountable, accredited thing.
I mean, sort of the accreditation piece doesn't really change in March. I mean, this will just, the 9,000 rule gets subsumed by 1190, and it has the same provisions. It's just the temporary rule doesn't need to be in effect any longer because the rules in March will go into effect. Sorry, I'm not explaining it very well. Okay, so let's move on. All right, page 60 and 61. At the last RAC, there was a fair amount of concern about registered processing sites not being able to provide products to patients of caregivers that might be at those processing sites. And again, the struggle here is that processing sites are not dispensaries. So the new rule language that's highlighted would allow a caregiver who works at a processing site to transport products to that caregiver's patients. But it's sort of an off-site transport. And then that would just have to be documented. So that's sort of the workaround that I came up with that again would still allow for that transport and that caregiver-patient relationship without patients coming on site to get products. Any questions about that?
Yeah, the patient, the caregiver then has to be an employee of the processor?
I would think so.
So if we're going to have only a handful of processors, I presume, so there's going to be a bunch of patients wanting, could be a bunch of patients wanting to get product.
Yeah, Les, you're
is that better?
yeah, and maybe just try to speak up a little bit if you could.
Okay.
I mean, patients can always go to dispensaries, right? I mean, that's where they can go.
Correct, but most of them can't afford it, and they have growers growing for them, and currently most growers are working with processors and are able to provide extracts or concentrates, whatever's needed to these patients without them having to pay an exorbitant price. Yeah, there can be a processing fee, if you will.
If a cardholder is doing processing, if they don't want to sell their products, transfer their products to dispensaries, they do not have to be registered with the Oregon Health Authority. So if you're a caregiver for, a few patients and what you're doing is, making some sort of edibles and you want to just provide those back to your patients and not provide that product to dispensaries, you are free to do that.
This is Cheryl. On that note, I might add in C, if any, because they may not be paying. It may be that they've assigned their caregiver or their grower to have stuff processed, and then they get a certain part back in return.
Okay. Scott?
This issue, the issue of delivery was wrestled with in the OCC work group, and there was, on the part of the industry and the police interest, there was some concern about having a delivery service with a high amount of cash and a high value product. And so I would think some regulation about it being a nondescript vehicle and a limit on the amount of money that can be available to make it less of a target. I think we have seen some instances of.
I can't hear you either.
I'm sorry, I'm getting over there are some public safety concerns with having a delivery with a high value amount of cash and a high value product. So I would think requiring that it be in a nondescript vehicle, and then putting some, a limit on how much money can be on hand in value of product, if there's legislative authority to do that, for the safety of the driver and the patient.
Are we talking with general patient to caregiver transactions, or are we talking commercial transactions with all that regulation?
No, is that John? Is that John?
This is John from Greenwood, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, we're just talking about individual caregiver to patient.
I mean, I don't think, honestly, that we need to put any restrictions on just straight caregiver to patient. That's my personal opinion, because already, so the backlash I'm hearing from pretty much every single person in the community is that we're stripping the patient's rights and connections to the medicine. I want to be really clear that this isn't the intention of the authority, and that we really put in place these, I think personally, more lenient access for patient to caregiver as it's been for the past however many years, coming on 20 years, it's like, I don't want to make it more difficult for the patient to get their medicine than we already have. So, I mean, the patient to caregiver exchange has never, ever posed a problem. So I don't want to start to act like it is a problem or it's going to pose a problem in comparison to the caregiver to dispensary transaction, which is quite high, high monetary values in these transactions, high amounts of product in these transactions versus a caregiver to patient. So I just want to be really clear on that topic. Sorry to interject there.
Okay, that's all right. Thanks, John. Amy, did you have something?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm sort of finding myself in the middle on this. I mean, I think that, I think.
Make sure you're talking into the
I'm
mic.
sorry. See, that'll teach me to talk. So, I understand that you were on page 60 and 61 trying to bring together these two kind of disparate needs. One is the statutory language you have to comply with, and the other is the need to be, for caregivers to maintain their ability to transfer to patients. And that somewhere like floating out there among all the rest of this is the fact that if I wanted to share with Mowgli, whether he's my patient or not, I can simply do that. There's nothing prohibiting me under whatever auspices from sharing the allowable statutory amount with whoever, patient or not patient. So, I mean, I just think this is really super challenging, and I don't know, I agree with what John is saying, that you want to make sure to maintain that. I can't tell if that's quite maintained through the like sharing economy that's built out through ballot measure 91, because you're allowed to share freely without any criminal liability or risk. So I'm finding it challenging to have these two systems, or maybe three systems, the ballot measure 91 system, the medical system, and then the kind of sharing economy in the middle that's carved out of ballot measure 91, that I think the advocates who sat on the ballot measure 91 drafting committee were kind of foresaw this in some way. So I think this is really challenging. I don't have an answer to that, but somewhere in those three pieces, it seems like that ability to share with each other, or give to patients, or give to individuals who are not patients but are still sick, or who are needy populations. I mean, somewhere in there's a solution in those three different kind of regulatory schemes. I think having, transportation requirements and additional requirements for a caregiver giving to their patient seems like too much. Because you don't require that under that kind of sharing economy piece. So I just think somewhere in there is maybe the answer to this, but I also think one of the biggest challenges is statutory language.
Okay, Les?
Again, reading this as literally as possible, how many persons could this employee caregiver be a caregiver for?
There is no limit on the number of patients that a caregiver can be a caregiver for, other than the statutory definition of caregiver, which says that you need to be the person that has sort of primary responsibility for the caring for the well-being of the patient.
So the patient, that would be the patient's designated caregiver, there could be no other caregiver for the patient, right?
other than the ability to designate an additional sort of organization as a caregiver, right,
Right.
you can have one caregiver.
Okay. So if I'm reading this correctly, then this is saying that the processor employee designated representative could potentially be a primary caregiver for a bunch of patients. And that allows for this transfer. Is that what you're
Theoretically.
trying to get to with this?
Right.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understand it because I'm, again, I'm finding it to be a difficult one to get my head around.
All right, so I'm going to move
So,
on.
sorry, this is John with Green Bodie again. So then what this is proposing, and let me be clear on the rules here, that a caregiver can have any amount of patients under their umbrella. In that context, be transferring any amount of cannabis that coincides with the number of patients under that person's umbrella. Is that correct?
Well, caregivers and patients have a collective 24 ounces of usable marijuana, and there's no specific permissible amount of cannabinoid products, extracts, or concentrates. So those limits would be limited to the Measure 91 limits.
Okay, so still one person can only carry, I mean, say if I had 100 caregivers, I can't carry, 240 ounces basically.
You mean if you had that many patients as a caregiver?
So, sorry, if I was a caregiver for 100 patients, I wouldn't be able to carry 240 ounces on my person.
I think you could.
Aren't there
Or I could carry 240 ounces. I couldn't hear the answer.
I think that you could. It's 24 ounces per patient.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Not that that's a good idea.
I like that, but that's just my own personal reality.
But would you, if you were carrying that much and you were making deliveries, would you want to be making a predictable route in a vehicle that said, it's medical marijuana and 4
Personally, I mean, I would make my, if I had that amount on me, I would be in my normal, undisclosed super outback like everyone else in Oregon.
And that's what I'm suggesting.
That's my undercover,
With a German Shepherd in the back.
So we do need to move on.
I don't have hippie stickers on there though, but
We do need to move on. I mean, I will say that, I think if you see registered processing sites, all of a sudden, lots of patient caregiver sort of stacking going on in order to take advantage of this, that it may be that the Oregon Health Authority looks a little bit more closely about whether or not caregivers are meeting the definition of a caregiver. So, okay, but we need to move along. Page 64. This is just sort of along these same lines. Just that you're gonna have to document that you've got right, because this is about inventory tracking. So processing sites are transporting to patients. That's going to have to be documented. Amy,
will you point me to the section that? So I just listened to you say that if there are too many caregivers associated with the processing site, will you point me to a section in here that gets rid of the requirement that you have enough cards for that processing site? Where's the section for that?
there aren't. I mean, you don't have to have patient cards affiliated with the processing site.
Is that, so did we just take language out somewhere? I just don't remember where that exists. That says, I mean, right now processors are processing with 400 caregiver cards or 200 caregiver cards. That's how they possess the material they need to process with. And I just can't remember where that change happened, that they're no longer required to have enough cards to possess the material that they're processing.
I mean, I don't know that it's taken out of anywhere. It just, I mean, it's in the, if you want to transfer cannabinoid products, concentrates, or extracts, or make extracts to a dispensary, then you have to be registered by OHA, but it keeps intact sort of the patient-caregiver processor relationship if you don't want to sell to dispensaries. But
so if you want, I just made sure I'm understanding this. The reason that caught my attention is because if you say that OHA might take notice if you have 100 caregiver cards, that's currently how people are processing. So unless that requirement has been gotten rid of, if you're a registered processing site, I would hope that that would not trigger an investigation because every single processing site has many caregiver cards.
Right, no, I understand. Okay. Page, so page 64, 1780 sub 2, there's a similar provision here that talks about producers not adulterating usable marijuana, so we just incorporated a similar provision. Made that applicable to processing sites? Yes.
Yes, I just had a question about that. I mean, I alter my medical cannabinoid product in color, appearance, weight, smell, and taste when I, add different flavorings to my cupcakes.
Right, that's
So I
not
wanna
what we're
make sure
talking
that's-
about.
What are we exactly talking about in that second sentence?
We're talking about adding,
Substance or compound. Just wanted to make sure that.
I think it's adding, it would be adding a color to make it appear that it's something that it's not. That what OHA would be getting at here. I mean, it may be that we need to refine this a little bit for processing purposes. But I mean, of course, you're going to be making changes to your product to make it taste different or look different. That's not what we're talking about.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that's clear.
Just apply to, say, propylene glycols, kind of the industry standard for loading pens, taking DHO, making a liquid, so it can be liquid in pens, or some processes are using limonene terpenes for the same purpose to enable vape pens to be filled.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, so what we're trying to get at is nicotine, adding nicotine to the plant, adding menthol, the things that the tobacco industry has done over the past 100 years to make their products easier to use and to entice youth and young adults to start their products.
So if, as a matter of course, simply for making a semi-solid a fluid, that's not meeting that.
No.
Okay. I was asked to clarify.
Yeah, this is Paul Lewis. I think it seems like the first half of it is the intention of the rule, which is about, adding other potentially addictive substances to it, whereas the latter part, as Dave points out, is, with producing of edibles, there are things that are changing the taste. That's the whole part of the point. So I think you got the core of it in the first half, and then maybe just sort of figuring out the right language in the second half.
Right.
This is Cheryl. So then a processor couldn't make a tincture because it has alcohol in it, which has different physiological effects.
No, the tinctures definitely are permitted.
Okay.
All right, I'm moving ahead to page 75. We made a few changes to the security provisions based on some feedback from CannaGuard. There was some concern about sort of cloud backup of video surveillance and offsite monitoring that maybe didn't mean what we thought it meant. So in 2120 here, you can store video recordings off-site as long as they're secure and as long as OHA can access those. I guess there are some security systems that are sort of made to be cloud-based, so we made that change. And on page 80, again, that's just the same statutory language that allows OHA to possess, seize, or dispose of marijuana to ensure compliance. So those are the changes from the last version that you saw, and now I think we need to circle back and discuss these, and then we'll take a break.
Right. Okay, so this is reflected also on the statement of need and fiscal impact form. So the only changes to that from when you saw it the last time are that under the bulleted, this is the one the two-page back-and-forth documents, the statement of need and fiscal impact on the top. Under the bulleted list, we added this paragraphs down. A number of rule numbers are being repealed, so we wanted to make clear that they're not necessarily being removed, they're just being moved to another section. And then we actually now have the fiscal and economic impact. So what's been proposed, and then we talk about what the economic impact is and why our number is such a large range, because we don't know how many growers are going to remain in the system and how many are going to go into which category. And so what we've done is we've proposed that the fee for a grower be increased from $50 to $200 per grower. That does not apply for individuals who grow for themselves. So if an individual grows for themselves and they don't sell to a dispensary, their fee is $0. If an individual grows for themselves and does sell to a dispensary, then that's where the $200 fee would kick in, because that's the point when they're impacting someone else and when our regulatory oversight kicks in, when we have additional duties that we have to do on the OHA side. Additionally, anyone who grows for someone else would pay $200 per person that they were growing for. So for up to 4 patients, you would pay $800. Then the processor rules, which you'll see under there, what we discussed, I think, 2 meetings ago, of $4,000, and there are no changes to the dispensary fees. So we really wanted to keep it so that the individuals who grow for themselves pay nothing, and individuals, and then starting to think about our criteria, where when does our sort of additional new regulatory sort of work kick in? That's why individuals who grow for themselves but do sell the excess to a dispensary, that's why they're in that sort of new category of having to pay the grower fee. So I'll stop there and see what.
Can I add? This is John with Greenwood. I guess I'm just a tad bit confused. So if someone, the medical fees, medical card, all that for themselves as a patient still stay the same. It's just that that person does want to grow for themselves, doesn't have an external grower, they don't pay an additional fee?
Correct.
Am I hearing that correct? Or so if someone basically is a patient and wants to go and do some commercial crossover, they would have to pay their $200 plus another $200?
That's correct.
Okay. And then so if someone is a normal patient and wants to grow for themselves, they just pay the $200 with no extra fee?
Correct.
Is there any, I mean, I want to keep going back to this, but is this a legislative fix on lowering? Is there any possibility of lowering the patient entry fee in this program, or is this something that's not even worth talking about? Or this isn't the appropriate place and time to talk about it?
So that is not something that we have within our authority to change, the $200 grower fee.
Thank you.
Excuse me, how about the $200 patient fee? $200 patient fee, can you change that?
Well, that is something we've established here. So right now I'm sorry, you're talking about the patient fee? Which one? That's the fee that I was talking about, right? So the $200 fee.
Yeah, that's what I was just asking.
Yeah, that fee is something that the legislature, you want to weigh in here?
I can't. Carol or Andre, do you want to kind of talk about what's within our? So we've been having a lot of comments from our patients who are part of the medical marijuana program about the fee structure, and what I'd like to do is invite Andre Orso and Carol Yan, who are our subject matter experts, to talk very broadly about what is within the Oregon Health Authority's realm of impact and what isn't, because I think we have, from all sides, a lot of interest in the fee structure. Is that?
It's my understanding, this is Andre, so it's my understanding that if we were to lower the patient card holder fee, that we would have to get that authority from the legislature. And I'll let Carol give you the specifics on
I guess, any more specific?
Well, excuse me, this is Carol again. We have, at this point, any type of changes to the actual fee structure have to go through the legislative process. We, as the Oregon Health Authority, are not authorized to make changes to that. So yes, those have been taken off the table. The only items that we have the authority to make the changes to are the components of House Bill 3400, which is increasing our scope of work and responsibilities that the agency that we will be doing. So that's why the fees that you're looking at are on the table, and we have the authority to bring those forward. That helps, sir.
Thank you, Carol. I can't think of the specific legislative provision in law that prohibits us from lowering those fees, but there is. It's a budgetary bill, yeah.
Yeah, it's through Ways and Means, it's not through.
But I understand the OHA can advise the legislator on the subject, correct?
No. That way. Our legislator.
So through the way.
We all can advise them and Bob.
Yeah, I think it's the most, the conversation around how to fund all of the health authorities programs happens within the Ways and Means Committee of the legislature. And so when the Ways and Means Committee is having their kind of puts and takes conversation, that's where the medical marijuana fees end up going to fund other public health programs. This is the area that we consistently hear about, is why do the medical marijuana fees pay for, for instance, drinking water programs throughout the state of Oregon. And I think that is something where I really encourage people who are patient advocates and who are very concerned about the fee structure. I think it's worth having that conversation with your legislator. Part of the struggle for public health is that we don't have a lot of general fund devoted to, for instance, our drinking water program. So, and it's a, I think for our state legislature, it's always a struggle to figure out how to fund these core infrastructure programs for the state, and this is one way that they've done it. I think it originated in 2009 with the big budget crisis. So it's a worthwhile conversation to have. It's not something that we can impact here at the Public Health Division, but I think how do we want to fund some of the core public health infrastructure, public health, drinking water programs, radiation programs, stuff like that. It's really worthwhile to have that conversation.
Well, isn't all this changing now with this new Measure 91? Aren't there going to be more accessible funds for all these programs? So maybe we can start really pressing our legislators to rethink this, since we are getting these external funds from this new cannabis movement program, to maybe start reducing the impact on patients and people really in need, like Oregon's been known for decades now. I mean, it seems like a very logical progression.
Yeah, so John, this is Shannon O'Fallon. None of the Measure 1 taxes, though, go to fund public health programs.
Oh, so that they don't go to any of that at all? None of that is being streamed there? That's terrible. I'm going to say that out loud, sorry.
So hold on, Jeremy has something.
This is Jeremy, just a brief comment on this. So my understanding is the $200 or whatever dollar for a patient to apply cannot be changed. What I do also understand is that there is going to be, as that patient assigns another individual as a grower, they have to pay $200 for that, and that is because of the impact that that grower, when transferring to the regulated dispensary program, would put resource strain on the public health division. That $200 charge for the grower, and for instance, if a grower were to have 4 cardholders, then there's $800 there, correct? That $200 charge for the grower can be changed, or is what is being proposed here. And I do understand and agree that there should be an additional charge if that grower is transferring to the regulated dispensary system. But for growers that are only growing for patients and giving it all back to the patient, or a small quantity or processing, I submit that there should be some mechanism, and I think it would be relatively complicated to do that, but if a grower is giving directly back to the patient and not transferring into the regulated system where it would impact OHA, they should not have an automatic fee for that if they do not intend to transfer to the dispensary. So if I'm a grower for a patient, and the patient assigns me as a grower, I'm not the patient grower, and I'm going to give everything back to that patient, that additional $200 fee, if it were to be covering, in the case that I go to a dispensary, perhaps when I go to the dispensary, that fee is collected. And if the product is given back just to the patient, there's no additional fees there. I don't know if that makes it more complicated or addresses the issue, or where the true impact of resources are. If it is because the patient is just assigning another grower, maybe there's some nominal fee there. But truly, I would submit that most of the resources are when that grower, on behalf of the patient, or the patient then transfers into the dispensary system, is where most of those additional fee dollars would be necessary to support those regulated dispensary program. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
This is Cheryl, ACMM. I just want to say for the record that the Advisory Committee on Medical Marijuana has a statutory mandate to advise on fee structure, and we've attempted to do that with the legislature, and we've never gotten anywhere, and they don't come to us and ask for our opinion. So it's been a huge frustration that we've had over the years. And I tend to agree with Jeremy too. I think it would make sense for people that are providing product into the system to pay the $200 to grow. But if I'm just growing for myself and I'm growing for my next door neighbor and I'm giving everything to my neighbor, it doesn't seem quite right that I should have to pay that $200 for the neighbor.
This is John Greenbody. I feel totally in support of that also, so that's just my perspective.
I incline to agree. This is Les. I think the medical, we've made some distinctions now between medical producer. It's reasonable to charge a license fee. But those that are not producers under the definitions, I wouldn't be in favor of charging a fee there.
Okay. Anyone else have comments on the fees?
Yes, just want to think the public would like to know where the OHA stands in regards to the fees. Do you think they should be lowered?
We have to cover our operational costs and our budgetary costs and expenditures. So that's where the $200 fee comes from. It's our guesswork that we're going to lose a significant amount of growers and dispensaries over to the retail side in the next year or so. So we have to cover that loss and expenditure, covering our operational fees, and then making sure that we're not in a budget deficit. So that's where that figure comes from. It's not something that we just pulled out of the air. I think we would all like patients to pay less.
So I take that to mean that OHA is saying that they will not seek a lowering of the fees.
We can't legislatively. That's
You can advise them, we're willing to do so.
So our role with the state legislature is such that we provide information and data. And so what we would do, if when the conversation happens at the Ways and Means Committee about kind of balancing out the budget, our role is to provide information about the operations of the agency. So we don't take a position for or against bills unless they are bills that our agency has brought. And occasionally when the governor's office brings a bill that globally affects agencies, then we can support that bill. But because we are a state agency, we're neutral on legislative issues.
Question, what are we getting for, I mean, I don't, not every little detail, but your operational could be a little better than just operational expenses.
Well, thank you, Rosa and Carol, for being so kind and articulating
the budgetary and political process.
Pull the things off there. Oh, careful. Okay, so operating costs are, with the House bill, we have to hire additional staff. 19.36 staff are allocated, that's FTE. We have not hired all, but we have to show that we can cover those expenses. We have to build the tracking system that's mandated in the House bill. We then have to implement the processes for that. We'll have inspections that need to occur, you have research that needs to be done. So you have research analysts, we have fiscal auditors, we have compliance specialists that have all had to be added to be able to meet the requirements of the bill. So.
Is that 19.36 additional staff?
Yes, that's what the bill had in place.
Okay, so we're running a little bit behind. If there's nothing else on that, we're going to take a break and then come back and talk about the testing rule. So 10 minutes, 10:30.
There's a problem, I just raised this as a red flag.
Okay.
The cost of the concerned with.
Okay. So John, is that you?
So it's John from Green Bodie.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm extremely concerned about this part where we have to have a lab come in and do our sampling. I mean, I'm not sure how heavily the labs are staffed right now. I don't know one in the state that's staffed for this or even can come close to doing this personally. I don't want to have my entire business basically wait on someone's scheduling reality and their staffing reality, and that they're going to be able to accommodate the level that some of these producers are going to be at, and how their priority reality is going to be on what they're going to offer. It seems like a huge bottleneck to me, so I'm kind of I'm really concerned about this one aspect of my whole business waiting on one lab schedule or two labs scheduled to try to get my material tested. This is a huge concern for, I know, not only me, but every other single grower in the entire state. So I want this to really be examined and, see if there's some way we can do this more appropriately and more systematically.
Okay.
John, could I follow up?
I would agree with John of Green Bodie as well.
Sorry, who is that? Is that Robert?
And I've been listening, but it's a great concern. Yes.
Okay.
Additionally, if I might follow up, the wait time involved, right now it's getting ridiculous with any lab, especially when you have the seasonal component for the outdoor grow. Labs are then swamped. So this is going to swamp them even more. So it's not only the expense, but the wait time we're going to be faced with, I think, is unrealistic.
Okay, so
And
Jeremy.
we are in a boutique market in Oregon.
Okay,
I mean,
John.
to secure all my IP and creating a boutique high-level medicine on all levels of curing, to having the highest amount of terpenes, to having the highest amount of cannabinoids active, ready to go for, because of the freshness and all this. I mean, to get that kind of all pushed aside because we need some labs to come in and test. I mean, this is a huge concern for me, and I know any other high-level organic boutique-level farmer in the state, which is basically what our brand in Oregon is kind of developed on. So this is kind of I don't know.
Okay,
John.
John.
To be redundant.
Yeah, John, thanks. I'm going to let Jeremy respond now.
All right. So with regards to this sampling, and I understand everybody's concerns as they've been expressed, but one clarifying point that I think that we need to all understand is this is not the laboratory going to sample. This is an organization that has been accredited to meet a certain sampling standard operation procedure. It does not even need to be a laboratory. A separate business entity could get...
Jeremy, actually, that's not...
Well,
not
I mean, I would submit that per the current regulation, that is how it stands, because we are limited by the inspection and enforcement capabilities of an agency to inspect another business that would be just a sampling. I do believe, and I understand everybody's concerns, but I think this is again a short-term scenario until another entity or even the manufacturer can be inspected against a standard operating procedure to ensure that representative samples are taken in the best interest of public health and safety. We need a representative sample. There's no other entity, in my opinion, right now, within the regulated structure of the proposed regulated structure that is better suited than a laboratory. If there was an opportunity for ORLAP to inspect a business entity that is not a laboratory and apply an accreditation and certification for sampling, they should be allowed to do so. We should be able to do that as well. But it's my understanding that there are some complications with the accreditation through ORLAP of another entity, not a laboratory, be that a business that is doing only sampling or a manufacturing organization, to achieve that accreditation for standard sampling procedures.
They can just get a lab license.
Yeah.
It's sampling scope.
A grower could achieve that accreditation with a lab license. There's going to be a huge conflict of interest there.
No, labs have to be both accredited and licensed by OLCC.
Right.
So it's not one or the other, but I mean, they would have to be registered or licensed as something.
I don't see accreditation as a silver bullet either. You know, Jeremy, this does says, as it's written now, only laboratory personnel may take samples.
Right.
Okay. I'm not good with that. And I hear
What's the alternate solution to that?
I'm not I'm not really interested in giving all the business to one particular group.
Yeah,
That's not.
I don't think the problems we've been facing can be shown to be a result of my not taking samples properly or a dispensary taking sample properly. We can document plenty of problems with labs, every one of them.
I'd just like to understand what an alternate solution would be to ensure that the batch being sampled and the sample being submitted to the laboratory, you know, there's full traceability through that.
The growers and dispensaries could meet the ORLAP training requirements. I would like to see additional requirements, another topic for pesticides and so forth, as part of obtaining a grower's license or registration. But the sampling process could easily be handled through education and training and or certification if need be. That's part of our license or registration, would be knowing what procedures we need.
I agree, but I just don't think that most growers or producers at this point understand the scope of a rigorous sampling design and sampling plan that will be required to ensure appropriate sampling of these batches of product.
I think you're making it a lot more than what it is.
I think we should be able to be offered the opportunity to be taught, to have a certification, to where, I mean, a lot of the other industries, they're not, this isn't how it works. This isn't how it works in other industries, so why are we putting it in this one? I understand the reasons in some degree, but if we can have accountability like in any other third-party certification, organics, say, you know, these people bring their testing in, the third party comes in and does the testing sampling. Everyone is then certified as following these rigorous guidelines in whatever format the structure is made, and then they're accountable for that. And if they say fail in the future, I mean, these certification processes are then revoked. I mean, there's certain protocols to this that honestly we're not following in this industry. So this is kind of a concern to me personally, that we're doing something that doesn't really coincide with other industries, and we're offering more protocols, which in some degree I'm in huge support of, but there's other aspects of consumerism and business that actually this is going to create problems for, and if we can not, in the rules, to where this goes into permanent rules, say the only person that can do it is a laboratory. I mean, it's written right there, so this is a concern. I want to offer an opportunity for instruction to where we can actually do some type of certification process to where to where we offer other options. to where we
So
can
John-
make this industry more productive.
John, so this is Shannon. So, we're short on time and I want to make sure that we have
Sorry.
adequate time for public comment. And this is not the only meeting where we are going to be able to discuss this. So I think we have a clear sense that the sampling requirements right now is a concern. So Madly has something to say, and then let's sort of move on from that and see if there are other parts of the testing rules that folks want to.
Yeah, we should kick off. This is what we want to accomplish today, is sort of getting a sense of these are the issues that we need to wrestle with over the next several meetings. We don't have to come up with a solution today. We're not in the same time crunch that we've been in with the other rules. So that's why we call this introduction, like initial discussion. But we want to get a sense of what the problems are. So this has been helpful, but you got it.
Madly?
I just want to say that good sampling has to happen. It's gonna happen. There's no version of this where good sampling doesn't happen. We could argue about whether it's a conflict of interest for growers to do their own sampling under any program. But the important point is that there's going to be an incredible amount of market pressure on the laboratories to be fast and effective with testing, turnover time, and with getting samplers out there. There's a lot of labs that are competing, and the labs that aren't fast and effective and handle this well for their customers are going to have a really hard time. So I don't think it's going to be as ugly as it seems.
Okay. So are there other, and I sort of skipped over some of the other parts of the rules, but again, so depending on what the product is, it has to be tested for pesticides, THC and CBD levels, solvents, and microbiological salmonella and E. coli. Jeremy?
A quick comment, this is Jeremy, and we can revisit this at another time as well. The cannabinoid concentrate and extract testing requirement, having solvents be a requirement for all concentrates and extracts, I think will be a concern. If you're looking at cannabinoid concentrates that may be defined as tinctures that are a base of an alcohol, an alcohol base, running a solvent test on those alcohol-based tinctures is not appropriate. Again, we're running into just some kind of definition of product types and subclassifications here.
What about a tincture that has a source material as PHO or something? I think we should still be running residual solvent testing on.
On the extract.
A lot of people make tinctures with a source material of BHO or CO2 or something like that, and then dilute it with alcohol or some other type of soluble soap.
Right. I submit that the residual solvent testing should be done on the extract before it was formulated into a tincture or other cannabinoid product. Also, just to comment on the
perfect, thanks.
Cannabinoid concentrate, not only those alcohol-based tinctures, but mechanical extraction, water ice, animal fat, and vegetable oil, and vegetable glycerin. I think that the risk of solvents within those types of concentrates is very low, and requiring the solvent testing on those, it may not be necessary and could reduce the overall testing cost if that was eliminated with some tricky language, I guess.
Okay. Okay, maybe just quickly we can talk about sort of what happens if you get a failed test and retesting. So on page 18, there are different thresholds, again, depending on what's being tested for, whether or not a test would be considered a pass or a fail. If there's any test that's failed, you can do retesting. And retesting has to be done by providing samples or having samples taken and tested by two different laboratories. And then if the samples pass the retesting, then it's fine, the batches can go on and be transferred or sold. If a sample fails retesting, then for some things it can be remediated, meaning if it failed for salmonella or E. coli, for example, I think there are some sort of sterilization that can be done, and then it could be the product that batch could again be tested, and if it passed the test, it would be fine. For pesticides, however, if a pesticide fails an initial test, fails a retest, it cannot be remediated, and so the batch from which those samples came would have to be destroyed, and that destruction would have to be witnessed by the Oregon Health Authority. All right. Okay. So we need to move on now to the labeling and the concentration side. Yes.
So labeling is something that we spend a lot of times with the rules, or the technical advisory committees at OLCC is working on basically over September and October. And so these rules apply for both medical marijuana products and for products that will be sold through OLCC stores. So I don't know where, Shannon, where should we, do you want to walk through it the same way we just did? And then I'd like to invite Bruce Catilius, who's the Deputy State Epidemiologist for the Public Health Division, to come up, and he's going to talk about the universal symbol. So we've been doing some market testing for the universal symbol, and we have 2 products, we have some results, and Bruce is going to share our findings. So you can go ahead while we get Bruce ready.
I'll do sort of just a brief overview. So again, you know, lots of definitions. Again, labels, what has to be on the label is going to depend on what the product is. So there are labeling requirements for plants, seeds, usable marijuana. Edible marijuana probably has the most detailed labeling requirements, and that's because under House Bill 3400, cannabinoid edibles have to be labeled the same way that regular food is labeled, so you have to have ingredient lists and things like that. There are various warnings that are required depending on what the product is. The universal symbol does have to be on all the labels. What else here? Labeling has to go through OLCC's pre-approval process. So OLCC is going to be doing pre-approval for both packaging and labeling. So packages and labels will have to be submitted to OLCC for pre-approval unless they sort of meet this generic standard, in which case they don't have to go through that pre-approval process. And there will be, what's the fee? Do you remember the fee off the top of your head? Anyway, there's a fee, there's a pre-approval fee, and I can't remember right now what it is. I can look that up. Yeah.
When will the authority be able to start doing pre-approval, since we'll have to have those labels changed by April?
Before April. I believe that in March, labels and packages can be submitted to OLCC for pre-approval, right? So the labeling and packaging and concentration size provisions, again, the rules are temporary rules. They go into effect in January, but they're not going to be enforceable or enforced until April 1st of 2016. So that gives folks some time. Yeah.
Do you have any estimate on how long that process might take?
Jesse, from OLCC, would you like to comment on that?
We'll be processing those as soon as possible. I'd also like to note that Shannon touched on this provision, but there's a provision that if you're using a generic label, it does not require pre-approval. That's outlined in the rule. So that'll be kind of a stopgap measure that people can use if there's any lag in the process.
Right, so I mean, OLCC understands, you know, that, the April 1st deadline was something that the agencies worked together on. So everyone understands that that there's going to be some urgency to getting things pre-approved. But again, the generic labeling requirements would get folks through in a pinch.
Shannon, does this apply primarily to so-called exit packaging, stuff that's leaving the dispensary?
Right, so anything that's transferred to a patient or caregiver, or on the OLCC side to a consumer, someone 21 years of age and older, that's that's the package, that's when the packaging and labeling requirements apply. So it's not, it doesn't apply to transfers between, you know, something, it doesn't apply to shipping containers, you know, necessarily, the OLCC has some labeling requirements for those. And it doesn't apply sort of on the medical side, it doesn't apply outside of sort of the OHA processing site dispensary realm.
Okay, because a lot of times there's product in a dispensary that, you know, doesn't, it may not be opaque or necessarily.
But once it
child-
leaves the dispensary, it has to be.
So are there any additional restrictions on, maybe that's advertising your packaging in a dispensary? Say you have CO2 pens that your company makes, and will sell in dispensaries. Are there any restrictions on that packaging, you know, as it sits on display? There's going to be different from what goes in an exit. Most products seem to go in an exit bag.
So you know, the packaging requirements are OLCC requirements, not Oregon Health Authority requirements. Oregon Health Authority has the labeling and the concentration size. OLCC has the packaging. So I would, and the packaging applies to the medical and the retail side. So I would urge you to look at those rules, and if you have questions, to direct those to OLCC. Okay? All right, so we're going to talk about the universal symbol? Yep.
Okay, so Michael asked me to just talk through the process that we went through to do some testing with different symbols that we were considering as a universal symbol to go on products that are consumable. Oh, sorry, so Michael's letting me know to let folks on the phone know that we're getting you a copy so you can see. So I think with the initial round of testing, we used maybe 12 different symbols. I don't actually have the exact number for that. We had 2 different rounds of testing. One involved focus groups and adult online survey with 300 adults. And then this most recent round of testing was with 7 different symbols, again with adults, specifically people age 18 and over. And that was 400 people who gave us feedback on this. And so we ended up asking in this round of testing 4 specific questions that we thought were important for symbols that were going to go on products that could potentially be in the household environment and that were consumable. We wanted to make sure they were distinguishable from other household products. So we asked these 4 questions. The first was, which catches your eye the most? The second question was which most clearly lets you know that marijuana is in the product? The third question was, which of these most clearly tells you the product is potentially dangerous? And in this case, we're talking about for children and unintentional exposure. And then the last was specifically that question, which is, which most clearly tells you to keep the product away from children. So in asking those 4 questions, the 2 symbols that you're seeing projected here are the ones that really rose to the top in those 4 categories. And so we wanted to bring these here for consideration and comments from this committee. Feel free to comment.
Yeah, go ahead. I definitely do not recommend using the one with the leaf on it.
I think Ohio State would think.
Because?
I'm going to need the people in the public to please keep down. Thank you.
You know, we're a very professional industry. Using a marijuana leaf is not a very good description of what we're doing moving forward. The THC one with the exclamation point is very similar to the one in Colorado, so it's one I would choose of the 2.
What I like is the fact that an exclamation point can connotate danger and caution, and it can also connotate just pure
So to sort of put this in perspective, so the rationale for doing something, we asked the contractor who developed these for us to come up with something that, so we could communicate to audiences who either don't speak English or don't understand what THC is or can't read yet. And so that's where the idea of coming up with an image as opposed to something that had THC in it came from. I'm not sort of weighing in one way or another. I'm just telling you that was the rationale for testing sort of for non-literate or low literacy audience.
And this is Bruce Catilius again. I can give you just a little bit more input on that too. So again, he sort of rose to the top as far as conveying those 4 responses to those 4 questions that we asked. One thing to know is just that in terms of the people having the perception that those messages were conveyed clearly, the THC symbol with the letters THC in it were definitely understood better by people who had previously purchased marijuana. So we knew, you know, between purchasers and non-purchasers. So people who hadn't purchased before didn't have a clear understanding of the THC.
What about CBD products? I love these. I mean, I just feel like they're just totally non-judgmental. Exactly what Bowsley said. Like, I don't feel like they're saying like danger to me. I mean, I love a focus group, so I would love to be in more focus groups. But I mean, to me, they like, it's not like a stop sign or like Mr. Yuck where it's like, ooh, this is icky. It's like a non-judgmental indicator. I'm pretty sure that's not what you were going for, but that's how I feel about it. I like them.
Just to be clear on that, we did ask that exact question, so we were thinking about that actually. What we want to make sure is that people see it, they know what's in it, and they know to keep it away from kids. That, at the end of the day, I think that's our greatest intention is that. So that's what we're trying to achieve with this.
I was going to say, keep away from children as well, underneath, right?
That's a warning.
Right, there are other warnings, yeah.
Triangles are good.
Thumbs up.
You could make it the shape of the tetrahydrocannabinol molecule. And we would know.
So how does this go on a product actually? Like, where is it on the packaging? Is it on the actual product?
It would be on the labeling, would be the idea. And we put out a minimum size in the rules already, and it would be somewhere in the neighborhood of for about the size of a dime, roughly, which we're looking at. It would be the minimum size based on product size.
And I know in Colorado they gone around and around about actual edible products outside of their packaging. I don't know where they landed on that.
Yeah, so I know Rob and I talked about this a little
Rob
bit.
Hendrickson from the Food Center. Yeah, my understanding is that Colorado is now mandating that all servings have this, well, actually not this symbol, but their symbol on each serving.
Etched, actually on the product. It's actually etched on the product
itself, as well as on the label. So that would get to the purchaser who can actually see it on the label, but then also the specific serving size as well, so that people would know if they saw a single product that was now unlabeled, they would know also that cannabis.
I don't think that requirement is in effect yet. I think it's sometime later in 2016, but yeah. Does anyone, I don't know, maybe the folks on the phone don't have the symbols yet, but do they?
We're working on it.
Oh, the folks on the phone, okay. Well, if we move on and you have folks on the phone have comments, pipe up.
So, yeah, Dave, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to, I had a conversation with the OHA last week and asked them if they were thinking of requiring the universal symbol being printed onto the actual products, and they said they were definitely not looking into doing that right now. As an edible maker, that would be incredibly difficult to do for almost all edible products.
I mean, I think we need to discuss it with this group, and we need to get a sense of what sort of challenges and successes Colorado is seeing with it. I need to learn more about the Colorado process.
This is Rob Hendrickson from the Food Center. It's not as simple as I stated. There's obviously rules, certain things you can't implant a label on. I think the target is things that are attractive, things that can be, so chocolates that are multiple serving size in a single bar. And the intent was to specify that a long list of people who ingested an entire candy bar when they there was 10 servings, I thought it was 1, it's to imply that those are 10 servings. So you take one piece that has the label on it, and that is the serving size. And then also we've had, Colorado has had a fair amount of children as well ingest them. And I think the intent is for education, for people to understand. I think it's more toward adults to understand that when you take one small piece of a chocolate bar, a caramel, or something that is solid, that you're getting that one dose, and that it's clearly implied that this is 9 doses, 10 doses, 5 doses, or so that was the intent. But there is verbiage, and we should look at the Colorado law about baked products and stuff like that.
Yeah, so we've got copies of the Colorado law. We'll make sure we distribute it for our next meeting, or our rules rather, and we can discuss it sort of some more detail then.
This is Paula. So I guess, I know it's not exactly part of this group, but I'm just assuming that education would go along with this, because again, it's the first time I've seen it, so
Right.
presumably the public in general hasn't seen it before, so.
Yes, that's correct. Right. Yeah, and we'll also work with other agency partners. So if you know, if it makes sense to have ODOT working on this with some of their messaging, for example, we want to make sure ODOT has access to this. The other thing I'll say is that Colorado has tried multiple times at a universal symbol, and I think they're on their like 3rd or 4th try now. So, and I think this is a difficult process to try to come up with one, and so that's why we wanted to get feedback from you.
I'm not sure it's an appropriate use of our license fees.
A universal symbol?
Yeah. Is it really going to be helpful? I mean, we have the warnings and everything else. Are there other products where a similar thing has been done that, you know, it's lowered death rates or rates of illness or something? Are we getting a bang for our buck out of it?
We can bring some examples back when we continue this discussion. Yeah. But we'll talk about the rationale and why.
Maybe if I may, Rob Hendrickson. I certainly have personally seen multiple patients who ingested a product that they did not realize contained cannabis and had the effects that were very surprising to them. So I think that, to me, that's the intent is, hey, before you eat this, just, you know, there's some cannabis in it. If that's your intent, great. If it's not, then, you know, that tasty brownie is going to make you feel different than you.
I got you, but the question had to do more with the symbol versus, I mean, the warning definitely is going on there. It will be on there. It's just, does this help in that regard? That, you know, is it unduly redundant?
Yeah, go ahead, Debbie.
Yeah, I just had a question of clarification. So the THC would only be on products above the 0.3 for THC and non-CBD products, or I don't see in the rules a differentiation between products that may only have CBD.
If it came from marijuana, then it's going to have the label on it. If it's an industrial hemp product, then again, it's not regulated by the Oregon Health Authority. But if it came from marijuana, regardless of the THC content or the CBD content, it would have the warning. The universal symbol would have to be on it.
That's a little funny.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why the non-THC symbol was something we considered to capture this.
But the THC symbol makes more sense because, I mean, when you're talking about accidental or pediatric overdose, it's just THC you're worried about. There's a lot of reasons to go with the THC one, but if you have a topical that's CBD only, I mean, that's just...
Yeah, so let's flag that as an item we'll work on.
For what it's worth, I have OD, if you will, on CBD products. And maybe there were pesticides mixed in it, I can't, supposedly it's pesticide free, but it's a remarkable product in small doses, but again, me as an individual, I've had some issues with that. CBD is just benign.
Any other comments?
Well, just along that line, in the definitions of activation time, are you meaning that psychoactive effects of THC, or it would be important to differentiate there? or some
Yeah, that's good.
relief of symptoms from CBD or.
Yeah, how are you gonna determine that? Because there's different strokes for different folks.
We know. And that's another thing we're gonna wanna talk to you about. So, you know, the next two meetings, and I wanna talk about, serving size in a minute before we move on, but that's sort of, these are the issues with the next two meetings, we have to focus on all the things we talked about sort of since the break. And beyond, we need more than those two meetings. Any other comments on labeling or the universal symbol before we move on to serving size?
Yeah. Are we gonna talk about the activation time thing?
Yes, we will talk about activation time.
Talk about it now?
I mean, what, yeah, kick it off about what sort of the issue is, but I don't want to get into the details today.
Yeah, I really think that the activation time indication is very, very, very misguided. I mean, it's applied to edibles where there is no activation time, and the warning that says, be cautious, this can take up to 2 hours, captures that in any activation time, you could use it to indicate that this can take anywhere from half an hour to 2 hours. You've already stated it in plain language, which is a little easier. You're requiring it for topicals. You're requiring it for topicals as well, which have no activation time and generally are not active at all. They can be active, but many of them aren't.
Right.
And then requiring it for usable marijuana where the activation time is instant is just, so there's not one of these use cases where it's providing any useful information without being also contradictory and kind of nonsensical.
So Madly, this was something that was discussed a lot, and House Bill 3400 specifically says that labels have to have activation time.
So originally, we were not going to have an activation time level on items that have instant, so on any basically combustible item, and we realized that the law tells us that we have to.
So if we wanted to fix this, because it's going to end up looking very silly and being misleading, we'd have to get a statutory fix in the short session.
That is correct.
I think there's several of those fixes.
We're going to move on to any last comments on labeling before we move on to serving size. All right, we can go through the text in a minute, but I want to draw people's attention to the two tables. And so there's table 1 on items that are sold at retail, and then table 2, which are medical marijuana items. So they're slightly different. So
Were these tables sent to us? This is Cheryl.
they should have been. Cheryl, we'll make sure that we'll make sure you get a copy.
We don't have. Okay.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. They're also on our website. We can, well, let's tell them where, yeah, tell Cheryl where let's tell folks on the phone where they are on the website. Let's take a 1-minute break.
Put up the table on the website on the
Where is it? So for folks on the phone, if you go to www.oregon.gov/OHA/HC MMJ/pages/rules. Cheryl, did you get that? We're sending you a link too.
Do you see that, buddies?
This is Deanne. Can you repeat that again just a tad bit slower, please?
Yeah, we'll email it to you. It's Shannon's gonna email it now.
H2.
Hey Matt, I just sent you the. All right. So while that's being sent, I'm going to just start talking. So what we've identified is we've created categories for cannabinoid edibles that are scorable and then non-scorable, and they're in different categories then. There's a category for topicals, there's a category for tinctures, there's a category for concentrates or extracts, and then a sort of a not edible or topical category. And we've identified that through several discussions we've had with medical and eventual recreational marijuana producers and growers that we've missed the mark on a couple of our definitions, and so we need to do some work on the definition of tincture to address tinctures that are more than just alcohol-based tinctures, because there are other kinds of tinctures that need to be captured in that category. There's a lot of confusion around where capsules fit. Some folks thought that capsules fit under the edible category, and that was not our intention. So we either need to figure out where capsules fit under the tables that we have, under the categories we have now, or consider creating another category for capsules. And then our definition of concentrates essentially only captures concentrates that are combusted, and we need to allow for either within this category or another sort of definition concentrates that are ingested, and so like RSOs, for example. And capsule, and maybe that's where we actually capture the capsules, is what we've talked about internally. So those
and suppositories don't miss.
right, and so yeah, we talked about suppositories too. So so I think those are the categories that we've already identified. We need sort of to reevaluate a little bit, and I think we can handle this through potentially definitions. So in addition to talking about what the limits are, we also want to talk about what kinds of products fit into what category or what class, so that we're actually saying what we meant to say. So I'll be honest, this is one of the things that every time Shannon and I met, it looked different every single time. So I mean, this has been an evolving process up until now, and we intend for there to be a lot of dialogue and back and forth with the Rules Advisory Committee on this. So what you see is our best sort of effort to date, and we'd like to get feedback and input from you to improve what we've got.
Why is there a distinction?
Please use your mic. Please.
Why is there a distinction here with non-scorable edibles on one and not included in the other?
Why is it not in the
Or should we ignore the OLCC side of things for now?
No, we should ignore the OLCC side of things. So our rules, OHA was given the responsibility to write concentration and serving size rules for all products, and so we should not.
So why do we not have non-scorable edibles on the medical?
Because we didn't identify serving size on the medical side. We just said that there would be a maximum package size of 100 milligrams, whereas the scorable and non-scorable is how you get to being able to have multiple package sizes on the retail side under this sort of construct. So the way that we've designed it is, when a product can be scored, then you can have the 10 servings. But since we don't have servings on the on the OMA side,
is that, you're going to sell an edible, doesn't it have to have serving size and all that stuff as part of the label?
And we're allowing, on the medical side, the producers to identify what the serving size should be on the medical side. On the retail side, serving size is 5 milligrams. If you can't score it, then you can have a maximum of 2 servings in the product. If you can serve it, then you can have up to 50 milligrams in there, so 10 servings.
This is Cheryl. I just want to bring up this issue on serving size versus dosage. And if you look at page 60 of House Bill 3400, the header is dosage. And I just think it's really confusing, especially if you're talking about edibles or suppositories. I mean, not edibles, but capsules or suppositories. I think you should call it dosage and not serving size. I have a little less problem with edibles. It is medicine.
You're right.
I agree with that also. That sounds more appropriate for our, what we're going for here. This is John Grayboody.
Okay, I mean, some of the challenges that we're setting it on both sides, and so we wanted terminology that made sense to everyone. Go ahead, Amy.
Are we bouncing around? Am I just like free to speak, or are we actually following some sort of
So
structure?
at this point, I wanted to talk about the 2 tables and identify any major issues that you had, but I'm happy to go through the rules as well if you've identified very specific items
No,
of the rules.
I'm happy to just talk.
Just
too,
talk,
but
that's fine.
I just wanted to make sure I
Right.
wasn't out of line.
No, you're good.
So I have a few issues that I want to address with this, and the first is I'm confused about why we're differing from Washington and Colorado in the recreational market. That seems to be working fine in Colorado for recreational adult use, and I'm not sure why we are diverting from that. The second issue is I'm not sure why we're imposing any requirements for the medical side. This market has been functioning from my perspective for a long time. I mean, I can't even name one problem, although somebody here probably can, and that is, as somebody who's represented clients in alcohol and pill and cocaine and heroin and cases for 15 years, I have yet to have one of those come across my desk. So, I mean, my hope, both from an attorney perspective and association perspective, is you will leave the medical market alone. There's absolutely no reason to regulate this piece of it. This is, I think, unnecessary. Nobody ever claps for me, so.
I'll allow.
I have a few more things, but,
Yeah.
so I also think, and we talked about serving size, and our hope is that all of the edible extracts should be regulated consistently. All of the products, tinctures, glycerin tinctures, vegetable oil extract, Rick Simpson oil, are all used by patients in the same way. They are not attractive to children, and we think that all these products should be allowed to contain a higher concentration of THC than cannabis edibles. So all of those pieces. I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, well, so I do need folks to stop, because we've got a few minutes to get through this before we get to public comment. So I appreciate that you're excited, but we need to move on.
I'm sorry.
So yeah, I mean, anything else, Amy?
Can I say something too also? I'm really at 100% full agreement with what Amy just said. I mean, a lot of this, for me, the medicinal amount that a patient needs to fight cancer, epilepsy, autism, whatever type of tumors. I mean, I'm making tinctures that are 600 milligrams a milliliter. You know, that basically, for me to make this medicine that's extremely effective to fight these kind of ailments, now I can't offer this to my patients anymore because of these labeling requirements. When these patients are in dire need of medicine this effective and strong, I mean, 600 milligrams a milliliter, if you can start to understand what kind of dosage reality that is and what kind of medicine people can be delivering to their child or their mother dying of cancer or their daughter dying of cancer, to be able to limit that. I mean, we're starting to play with some really, I don't know, we're starting to limit the benefit of really the ability of this plant. We should really be really careful about that.
So, I mean, I think what we've got to figure out when we come back next month is, when we come back on January 11th, is how do we talk about this? Because we need to talk about the retail limits for serving size, and we need to talk about the medical limits for serving size. I don't want them to get confused, but there's also a similarity in the types of products that we're talking about that I don't also want to have them a discussion in a vacuum and a discussion in a vacuum. And one more thing, Amy, to answer your question about why the 550 versus the 10-100 serving size, that was a recommendation that came out of a scientific advisory committee that we convened in the spring and over the summer to take a cautious approach. And so folks are aware, and we'll talk about this in more detail, we asked for public comment before we proposed these, and we got basically two sets of comments. We got folks who, on the medical side, said, you know, we want to see, similar to statements that you provided, Amy. And then on the retail side, we heard from many people in the public health and public safety community who felt like 5 milligrams and 50 milligrams was too much. And we needed on the retail, and I'm talking about retail, on the retail side, we needed to focus on single serving size, and those being the products that are allowed. So we're going to need to have that discussion as well.
I know what about some of the legislators that really were not wanting this to affect the medical program as heavily as it is. You know, we were trying to create some limitations for the recreational program and not offer high-level medicine to the recreational public so they can get high. You know, so we were trying to mitigate that. From my understanding, for the last 4 years, none of them were trying to say, hey, let's extremely regulate the medical market and make all these medicinal patients that have been using this for, you know, some decades now, create all these limitations for them so they're not going to be able to get the effective medicine they've been using. So I don't think that was anyone's intention ever.
Hello, this is Jeremy. Just very briefly, I'd like to reiterate and agree with Amy's comments about no limit for the medical program. However, I would like to understand the basis of the recommendations that came out of the Scientific Advisory Committee. If there was any public technical report or other research papers that they reviewed and based these recommendations on, I'd like to see that information. I haven't been able to find it through the normal OHA website, just to kind of understand those pieces.
So, I agree with what Jeremy, and I was going to ask for something similar, although not as eloquently as Jeremy just did, or as professional sounding. My issue is that I like to see these really productive regulations happening, but I don't like them to be driven by fear. And so, but it sounds almost like there were two groups, and one group was saying, the medical group or the cannabis advocates were saying, you know, please don't touch this, and then the public health side, and I don't necessarily really like the way that that was categorized, that's the public health side and this is the other side, but that the public health side is saying, no, we really need to be hyper cautious, and even though we have what looks to me like a successful rollout of 2 other states using a standardized and similar method, that somehow we sided on, and I guess maybe I won't say we sided on the side of public health, but we as a state seem to be siding with fear instead of what has been working. And so I just don't want to see that happen with edibles. And I don't know, I guess I also like to know if I'm just shouting into the wind and this won't change.
We're going to have a discussion about it. It looks like Paul wants to say something, but I would argue instead of using the word fear, I would say precaution is the word that we use.
Well, and I don't mean, and I'm not trying to argue with you.
I understand.
But I think that that is, if you're rolling out a brand new program and there's no experiential data to rely on, then you can say we need to be hyper cautious because we've just never engaged in this before. Or if you have engaged in something and it's been dangerous and you're going to start to reel it back, then you can say it's precaution. But I think in this situation where we have so much empirical evidence that there isn't necessarily such a huge danger, that saying that that's being cautious doesn't actually kind of resonate so well with me. So I am hoping this is something we can revisit, and if there are going to be some changes made to this, because it does, to me, kind of fly in the face of the experience that we've had.
This is Cheryl, and there is actually one article that I'm aware of called Medicinal Cannabis Rational Guidelines for Dosing. It goes clear back to 2004. And even that paper found with dronabinol, which is synthetic THC, that maximum recommended dose was 100 to 120 milligrams of THC. So there is experience with this. The paper discusses what amount they're getting by smoking it, what people tend to use, what Washington and California and Canada had done, and so there wasn't really too much caution, I think, coming out of that group.
So this is Paul Lewis from the Health Officer Caucus. I think being on both this RAC and the OLCC RAC, that over the last 6 months, there's a huge amount of input that's been received and some workable rules that are being developed for what I think everyone realizes is the retail side, which is going to be new, that there's a really smooth start and a really safe start to it. So I think, you know, we're trying to tease apart here the retail and the medical with some success, although almost every speaker has talked about both simultaneously. So I'm going to try to limit my comments just to the retail side. I think that's a whole different set of things around medical, and I think when I look at Table 2, I think some of the earlier comments are kind of addressed there because serving sign is not addressed in Table 2. It's just the container size. But moving to Table 1 and the retail marijuana section, I think the distinction that we haven't had much experience with is particularly on the edible side, and especially on those edibles that would be considered sort of snack food or candy. And I think that's where, as a pediatrician, I do think for a smooth, safe start, that it's reasonable to be cautious, not fearful, but cautious around that. And as a pediatrician, when we think about safety, we have to think not only about the substance itself, what it can or can't do, but also how much of it is available, and that children are about a third to a quarter the size of adults. So a safe dose or amount for an adult could be 3 or 4 times that amount for a small kid. The other thing is, and again, having seen a lot of the creativity that's come out around edibles, whether it's candy or the famous gummy bear or other sorts of things, these are things that are inherently attractive to children, and unlike, you know, high-proof alcohol or raw tobacco, they actually do potentially taste good, which I think really is a specific distinction from those. And then finally, it's kind of useful, we just talked about the universal symbol. Our preschool children are even going to be less educated about the universal symbol than the adults who've never seen it either. And obviously, they're pre-verbal, and so all the labeling and those sort of things are not going to really be of a lot of value to them. So again, I think this is a healthy discussion on the retail side. And rather than going up on it, I think that for the scoreable things, imagining a candy bar, that it would be safer to do what you do on the second line, which is say 10 milligrams total for that.
Hi, Rob Hendrickson from the Poison Center. I just wanted to comment on, I'm on the Scientific Advisory Committee, and I think we should provide the data that they looked at, but just to share the dosage information. From my role at the Poison Center, I am concerned about, I realize we have to weigh convenience of patients and citizens who want to use cannabis products. But my concern is children, specifically toddlers, getting into particularly edibles. So what data do we have out there? Well, first of all, we have pretty good data that in states that pass a medical marijuana law and then also pass recreational marijuana laws, we know that calls to poison centers, as well as admissions to emergency departments, admissions to the hospital, and even admissions to pediatric ICUs for marijuana-related ingestions increase. It seems, people who use cannabis products use a huge range of doses, and we all understand that people can work up to very, very large doses. But I think we can assume at this point that the toddlers we're talking about are not on a medical product, but I'm talking about children who get into a product that is their parents or their grandparents or neighbors or their babysitter, etc. The data that we have is on the dronabinol studies, which is the sort of pharmaceutical cannabis product. We know that at doses that would be equivalent to a toddler's dose, a 1 or 2 year old, of about 10 milligrams, there is an 86% adverse effect rate. Now, those effects are altered mental status, dysphoria, fast heart rate. So at 10 milligrams for a toddler, those are the effects we start to see 86% of the time. I have some data from Colorado there's a published paper looking at emergency department visits for cannabis-related product ingestions. And this is a small number of patients, so we have to take that into account. But the data that I have is that the children who went to the emergency department and required observation in the emergency department for their symptoms ingested the equivalent of about 30 milligrams of THC. I'm saying the equivalent because I'm converting milligram per kilo doses and milligram per meter squared doses just to make it simpler, but I'm happy to provide the raw data. The children who had to be admitted to the hospital to be observed overnight was 70 milligrams, and the children who had to be admitted to an ICU setting was 100 milligrams. So this is the basis of my concern with providing a product that has two things. One, for a toddler, a relatively high dose. But in addition, multiple servings in one product. The concept of having a product, a recreational product that's a chocolate bar that you use 1/10 of and then put the other 9/10 in the fridge to use as a later time seems unreasonable to me. So I don't see much of a reason for a specific one product to be much more than a serving or two. I understand that there's some differences in how you would package things, but that is our rationale. Children generally get into substances, they generally eat one. They do not usually go and open multiple packages, but they do ingest one. And a child, I know of a very recent case of a 10-year-old, this is not a tiny child, a 10-year-old who ingested in Colorado a 100 milligram chocolate bar and became unconscious. Had to have a breathing tube put in, they went on a mechanical ventilator, and they were in the pediatric ICU for 2 days on that ventilator. So these things happen, and that is our concern. So I wanted to kind of just go over the issues with dosing and my concern with the toddler ingestion. So thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thanks. So this is, I think, and Amy, I'll go to you. I think this is a preview of what we're going to need to be discussing. So we'll make sure, we've got a list here. We'll make sure to bring the info from the Science Advisory Committee. We'll get the data Rob just shared in a form that we can understand that doesn't involve squares. And I think we'll have a robust discussion about this. And Amy, I'll turn it over to you. And then I need to go to public comment. We've got several people who signed up, and we need to give them time.
So I don't want to take too much time because I do want to hear the public comment. So I like looking at statistics myself, and I pulled up an article that Noelle had actually written about the number of preschool age children who were treated in 2014, and it said that in the previous year, 7 children younger than 5 were treated. In 2012, 10 were, and in 2014, 11 preschool age children were treated at Oregon healthcare facilities for marijuana poisoning. And then I pulled up those dishwasher pods that we all use in our dishwasher, and I noticed that in 2012 and 2013, approximately 17,000 kids have been treated at hospitals for consuming dishwasher pods. And to me, these issues, I mean, I've spoken at enough of these events to have spoken after people sharing those kind of statistics. And to me, the concern shouldn't be around changing the dosage. If there are concerns, I think you're doing a nice job in the packaging piece and the child safety piece around how kids get their hands on this. But to me, those kind of very small numbers, and again, I've been doing cases for a long time where kids have gotten into things or parents have been reckless. I've done dependency work for almost 15 years. And you know, I very, very, very rarely see a cannabis case. So to me, this is just a complete overreaction to a very small statistical number. And so I'm hoping we do have a better, longer discussion.
Yeah, and then we're done. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to talk about one part of this table that we haven't really talked about.
Yep, go ahead.
So, non-scorable edibles.
Yep.
So, you know, Oregon has so far decided to go with a 5 milligram serving size and a 50 milligram package limit. And the way it stands right now, that if you can't score the edible, it's a 5 milligram serving size and a max of 10 milligrams package size. And without getting into the debate over the 550 base level, I think this is really, really wrong. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's going to completely torpedo major categories of the market that do drinks and that do edible products that are semi-liquid or can be eaten with a spoon. And I think it just lost sight of the fact that we had been very, very cautious when we settled on 5 and 50. And that there are ways to make markings on packages and provide spoons or whatever, and you know, those are already incorporated into the rules. So that 10 milligram limit, it's just crazy. It's so low that so you could keep it at a category of non-scorable edibles and bring it up to 30 or 40 and have it be a viable category. But really, as long as you put in intelligent rules about making markings on the side of packages, I think that it shouldn't be a category. I think it should be 550 for all edibles. So we should talk about that more.
All right, so that's a preview of what we will be talking about in the next couple weeks, or starting in January 11th. So we will have ample time to discuss it rather than today where it was just little snippets. So we've had a lot of people sign up for public comment, so I'm gonna have to be a little bit more, I'm gonna have to be really stringent on the time. So I'm gonna ask people to limit their public comments to 2 minutes or less. I will stay for as long as it takes to get through everybody for public comment. I'm gonna ask that you please allow the RAC members to leave at noon if they have to leave. If RAC members want to stay, you're welcome to stay as well, but I recognize that you're volunteers and you may have other commitments after noon. So, Senator Przonski, are you on the phone?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Senator, why don't you go ahead and start, and then we will go with the people in the room.
All right, thank you very much. For the record, this is Floyd Przonski, State Senator District 4, which includes parts of Lane and Douglas counties. Thank you very much for all that are in attendance and for the commissioners that are volunteering their time. I wanted to give a few comments on my impressions based on Oregon Health Authority's presentation to the Measure 91 Joint Committee back on 11/16, so November 26th, during our legislative days. I'm very concerned after hearing some of those proposals, and the proposed rules do not reflect the actual language of the legislation that was passed by the legislature or the legislative intent and record that is part of these proceedings. Specifically, I was very taken back by the recommendation to decouple patients from their growers on the medical grow sites to open up access information portals to law enforcement, expansion of tracking requirements to basically require seed-to-sell type of tracking, where we explicitly said there would be something separate and less onerous than what would be on the recreational side. The serving size of medical patients, which we've heard some of the testimony or some of the comments today from some of the commissioners, bring those forward as well. I'm very concerned about how the dosage available to a patient could be modified by what we need to do for labeling them for rec users, whereas we've heard where you have patients that need a substantial amount of THC, and they would have to buy and consume vast much chocolate to do that. Specifically under the rules, these are OIRs 333-008 and then the XXXX. The areas that I'm concerned with is the inspection and reporting of small personal gardens. It was never the intent of the legislature to have an individual's personal gardens to be inspected by anybody. Residency for patients, I am concerned that I've heard that maybe we're now going to require a patient to have some type of residency before they are able to access medicine through with a provider's authorization. Security and other regulatory requirements, I am very concerned about some of the issues, as I mentioned, as to what came out during the discussion for the legislative days. On the March 1st deadline for Growsite plants being reduced, it was never the intent of the legislature that we were going to take someone that has an active license that has not run the full gamut of the 12 months to be cut off on an arbitrary date. Their licenses should stay in effect until the license date expires. And lastly is the patient processing their own marijuana. It appears that we're going to require, from what the proposed rules say, stringent requirements on a patient doing their own processing, and I believe that that is not part of the intent of what the legislature intended. Thank you very much for allowing me to give my short comments.
Thank you, Senator. So now I'm going to talk in batches of 2. It's not always clear if people actually wanted to comment. Sometimes you wrote a comment about who you were, and so that's okay too. So if I call on you and you don't want to give comment, that's fine. And try to keep it to 2 minutes or less if you can, and try not to be repetitive. So if someone has already spoke, we need to sort of, on your topic, it's fine to just say that you agree with what they said. So Mike Rockland and Sally Alworth. Thanks. Go ahead, Mike.
Testing.
Yeah, go ahead. You're good.
Okay, great. I'm Mike Rockland, a member of the American Cannabis Association. I also have Melissa with me.
Melissa Rivera, also a member of the American Cannabis Association.
And we are in the process of formulating more of an Oregon-based part of that group. So we're very interested in the process, and especially with OHA. Things I've heard today have to do with the laboratory issues, standard reliable practices, and there are bases for this in industrial hygiene. NIOSH, National Institute for Occupational Health and Safety, and ACGIH, American Conference of Government Industrial Hygienists, already have random sampling methodology. This is all laid out very well. It's been done for 50, 60 years. Another resource for you. The universal warning signs, I have a concern about those colors. If you look at the ANSI standard, American National Standards Institute, warning sign colors for danger are red, black, and white. So that conveys something that really is inappropriate. I think more of a caution or warning would be appropriate based on what we know now as evidence. Some of the reports I've heard today, and I've looked at some of the ones in Colorado, have a lot more to it than what we've seen. So we need to do some research. I'm reaching out to OHSU, to the Voices Center. We'd love to work with you on that, analyze that a little bit further, make sure we can do all we can to help you with that. Quantity limits, I think we've already heard. For medical, that's inappropriate. I've testified before, that's inappropriate. Testified to legislature, that's inappropriate. For medical people that have been used to larger doses. The table, therefore, reflects something that for medical should be struck on table 2. That's what I recommend. And in serving size, we talked about that, but if you also look at the retail versus the medical, serving size appears to be, for whatever reason, lower edible than other things. So I think there was one that was 4 times what it was for retail.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay.
Sally Alworth.
Thanks.
Good morning. My name is Sally Alworth. I'm a member of the Oregon Cannabis Association and also the co-founder of Luminous Botanicals, a small company based in St. John's making cannabis concentrates for the medical market. I've got written copies of my comments that I'll share with the committee, so I'll just try and hit a couple of top points here. The Oregon Cannabis Association supports regulations that promote public safety and public health, protect patient access to cannabis medicines, and represent reasonable regulations for small businesses.
We unequivocally share the state's goal of preventing or decreasing incidents of accidental ingestion, but we believe that the best way to achieve this is through sensible labeling and child-proof packaging rules, rather than through unnecessarily restrictive regulations on potency. We're committed to working with the OHA to look at ways to strengthen packaging and labeling requirements to ensure that cannabis products do not fall accidentally into the hands of children. We're very concerned that the potency and dosage limits in the temporary rules miss the mark, and if allowed to go forward would have unintended consequences for safety, for businesses, and for the regulated market. We'll be giving consumers the incentive to purchase a greater number of packages in order to accumulate the quantities of cannabis they want, which we think actually leads to a greater likelihood that packages will fall into the wrong hands. We'll also be providing an incentive to the illegal black market to produce higher potency edibles if recreational edible standards are set very low. And we know that those products will be untested, unlabeled, they'll have irregular potency, and they will not be packaged with child safety in mind. We're also concerned that these rules will significantly increase the cost of doing business in the regulated market for small businesses like mine.
Thank you. Kathleen Johnson and Carla Kay. You go ahead. Whoever gets there first, it's fine.
My name is Carla Kay with Skunk Farm Research and Specialized Formulations, and I agree with pretty much everything that's been said at this point in time. I just had a couple of things that I wanted to add to it. I've been working for some time now with compounding pharmacists, and I don't want to disagree with anyone. I used to think that topical didn't affect people, your head effect, no psychoactive effects. But after working with this pharmacist and working also with a couple of nurses, people who have really low tolerances, yes indeed, you do get high, can get high from a topical application. So because it is systemic, so you have to consider people's tolerances as well as how healthy their endocannabinoid system may be. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is on the testing. I can't remember who suggested that we test before we compound into edibles or whatever we're going to make, and that totally fits with how a compounding pharmacy works to this day, and that is you test the efficacy of your particular product, and then you mix it in with whatever you're compounding, whatever medicine that you're going to make, and occasionally batch test to make sure that your math is correct. That's the way it's done in the pharmaceutical world right now, and I'd like to see us following the same suit. It is, after all, a medicine. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Kathleen Johnson, and I'm here on behalf, can you hear me okay? On behalf of the Coalition of Local Health Officials. The Coalition of Local Health Officials represents all 34 local health departments in Oregon who work to protect the public's health. Oregon's local health departments support a 5 milligram serving size and 10 milligram package size for retail edible and drinkable marijuana products. This is because children are small, so the toxic dose is lower, and the youngest children do not read, so any written warnings are ineffective. A lower suggested serving size and package size would protect our most vulnerable. Strong research evidence indicates that the greater availability of marijuana products increases pediatric exposures to marijuana and subsequently increases poisoning from accidental ingestions. Colorado legalized marijuana in 2012, as you all know, and has since seen increases in exposures among young pediatric patients. Infants and toddlers, as it was mentioned earlier, can and do overdose on marijuana and tend to have more severe symptoms than are typically associated. Symptoms can include respiratory problems, extreme sleepiness, difficulty walking, lethargy, anxiety, and sometimes hallucinations. Early data from Colorado Poison Control Centers and hospital emergency room show that numerous children have accidentally ingested their parents' or grandparents' marijuana edibles, as mentioned earlier as well. And Oregon now has the opportunity to protect children from exposures to marijuana edibles by limiting the concentration of edible products to the 5 milligram serving size and 10 milligram package size. Thank you. I also just want to note that this was submitted electronically as in addition to testimony from Benton County Health Department. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Barbara Cantone and Dan Stoops.
Skipping. Skipping.
They said
they'll skip.
They'll skip, okay. Justin McDonald?
Good.
You're good, okay. Sherry Roadhouse? Roadhouse? Sorry if I'm getting these names wrong. No? All right. Dave Mercutio? Mercurio, I'm sorry.
Thanks.
Apologize, Dave, for the misspelling. And Lindsay Reinhardt?
Hi, my name is Lindsay Reinhardt. I'm with Dope Magazine, Serious Extracts, and the Organism Extractors Association. My testimony on testing, there should absolutely be no gap for mold, mildew, and pesticides for consumer health, especially people like me who are susceptible to lung infections if there's mold in my cannabis. On page 61, processors need to be able to give patients extracts freely without being the patient's specific caregiver or grower, as industry is extremely compassionate. John Brody gave great testimony, and I completely agree with everything he said. And Amy, you've been crazy on point today. Thank you.
Stop clock is right.
The processors should not be able to transfer from they should be able to transfer from their site and not have to transport mass amounts of cannabis product to the patients. And they need to be able to give that product to any patient, regardless if they're the actual caregiver or grower or not. It was stated in this meeting that unlimited caregiver guards are available. However, I'm wondering how long you're going to allow that for since you're changing everything. On page 64, processing sites need to be able to give the processed goods to inpatients, and no added terpenes on that is how I'm interpreting that rule, and I would like to see clarification because most of the terpenes infused are food grade, not lung grade. There's no need to increase grower fees. We already have a surplus of fees that are moved to the general fund that are not used to provide a better medical cannabis program to the state's patients. For testing, representative samples can be picked up by labs currently. A producer or processor should be allowed to take a whole batch into the lab if that's their choice. There should be some middle ground there. On topicals and concentrates, they do not need to say do not eat, as some topicals are edible. The ones that are not should be marked do not eat. On concentrates, THCA has many health benefits, and if it's consumed in high doses, it should absolutely be allowed to be eaten. Retail concentrates and extracts limits of 250 milligrams per serving are inappropriate. This would mean adulterating product down to 25% THC, which is something that nobody wants to do and is not allowed by law, or quarter-gram portionings, which would mean that people trying to meet the 5-gram sales limit would have to buy 20 portions of cannabis concentrates and extracts.
Thank you, Lindsay.
I'll submit the rest of my testimony in an email.
Hi, thank you for your time. I'd also like to second both the lab aspect and Amy's aspect today. That covered a lot of our points. What got me here today was the fear of the transfer to transfer. My name is Dave Mercurio. I'm a patient grower, edible maker, and I've lived in Oregon since 2001. I've been a medical patient since 1996. I also am speaking on behalf of 4 previous patients of mine that are no longer with us. As a maker of someone that does an edible product that's not scored, the scoring ability for my product will basically end my business. I make an RSO chocolate right now that specifically is high in CBDs with a higher THC limit and CBD limit than is going to be allowed. And what this is going to is extremely ill patients. And I think what happens a lot in the packaging aspect in the debate is we're getting lost a lot between the recreational side and the medical side. The packaging requirements, and then ultimately if it gets in the hands of children, is going to be up to the parent. I think we all need to remember that. The parent, the person, the child that gets this, it's not going to change because of the packaging or where they got it. It's going to be up to the parent's use, similar to a normal prescription. So when we're talking about alcohol and the recreational side, where a parent and their child may then go into their alcohol cabinet and grab some alcohol, is much different than a medical aspect where somebody that's prescribed a prescription by a doctor that then has that maybe in a sealed bottle. So I really feel like that we need to understand the difference between a medical dose for a medical patient and a recreational dose for someone more than likely that's never tried a cannabis product before. So amongst the packaging and all that, I feel like that's very important. As far as the scoring goes, for some of these things, especially in the milligram dosage for something like a 0.5 for RSO, without something like a physical machine, which costs thousands of dollars, at this point I don't even know how to do it, to actually be able to dose the medicine to that degree isn't even possible with RSO. Meaning that to get the accurate dose that's required in the testing procedure, it's not like normal food where you're mixing in the batch and then you're doing a test of the whole batch. For us to be more accurate, we're individually dosing each actual item and per piece, and then that way we're able to get more of an accurate dose. So this idea of just being able to mix this in or separate it out for at least a non-scorable dose is in some ways not possible.
Thank you.
So my hope is that for patients that need this medicine, that we continue to allow this. And lastly, without the inclusion of medical patients to stay in recreational places, there won't be a medical program because medical growers will not renew their cards, and the handful of medical only places that are going to be left will all be vertically integrated. So if we want a medical program, we need to make sure that medical patients are still allowed, and my hope is without a tax in the recreational dispensaries. Thank you.
Thank you. Stacy Marie George and Chelsea Cantone.
Hi, my name is Stacy Marie George. I am a medical safe access patient. I came to Oregon in February of this year, and I'd like to thank everyone for making it possible, first of all. The problems, not really problems, issues I have, this is the first hearing I've ever been to, so I'm a little off. I know what I use each day. I know I get 3-gram syringes full of my FECO or RSO, or however you want to use the wording, of cannabis oil to treat my cancer and my leukemia. I have chronic myelogenous leukemia. I have non-epileptic seizures. I have an anxiety disorder, but the cancer right now is the big one. In 2 weeks and 1 day, with 4 different oils and hybrid doses, getting up to 3 grams of oil each day, I was able to go down from a 70,000 white count to an 8.7 while on Sprycel and cannabis oil. Based on the limitations you are putting on here, that will limit my medibles, that will limit my oil, that will limit the dosing that I am able to use to treat my cancer, to be able to be here today. Because I was able to come to this wonderful state where you have an amazing medical program. But now you're trying to put limits in that most cancer patients aren't going to be able to abide by. We're then going to be making our own medicine at home, not using the medical labels and the prescribed dosing. We're going to be making our own to make the medibles to what we need for our dosing, because 100 milligrams in a chocolate bar, I'm sorry, but on chemo pain, that is not going to touch my pain. It's edible topicals. I mean, you're putting 2% limits on most topicals I use have a 3% THC at least. At least. I don't understand from a new patient standpoint, anyone else, most patients can't be here at these meetings, and even as a new patient, I'm sitting here dumbfounded at the wording and how you want to put these limits for other patients such as myself. There's no way. I'm also a member of I should mention, Parents for Pot. I have a 9-year-old in my home, and my daughter has never overdosed or had any cannabis reaction because I teach and treat education at my house as well. It's kept up where the vitamins and all the other medicine in my home is. So it's a reduced chance of her ever getting in contact because she's educated that it is medicine, it is not food. I need to make that abundantly clear because I am a medical patient, not a recreational user. And there needs to be access for medical patients in the state of Oregon because we need more than your regular consumer. It is required by our health, it is required by our body, and our illness, unfortunately, we did not ask for, requires it. I beg you to please reconsider this draft for the patients, for the people who cannot be here. Look at the guidelines, look at the limits, safe access. I can't even grow my own plants next year when I apply for another card. I have 2 years now. I can't grow for myself, but I can have 4 recreational plants? That makes no sense. New patients coming from Florida and other states that have no safe access will have no access to grow their own medicine. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your effort for this.
Chelsea.
Hi, my name is Chelsea Cantoni. Oh.
Go ahead.
My name is Chelsea Cantoni. I'm an extractor and also a safe access patient. I came here from the East Coast originally and arrived last year. So I also do not have access to growing my own flower, but because I make concentrates, a lot of this legislation will severely impact my ability to make my own medicine because I am new in town and trying to find a grower, a medical grower of standard that will take on new patients in a highly regulated medical marketplace is going to be increasingly difficult. I'm also concerned about the laboratory requirements because concentrates and extracts are very delicate products, and if you're asking to have laboratory technicians, who I'm sure, obviously are trained in sample taking, but that's a long time to ask someone to wait for a technician to come take care of your product, analyze it, and then allow you to take it to marketplace. So I think that you're going to lose a lot of small producers, and as other people have said, it will be vertical integration and marketplace shrinkage with limited access to medication for patients. Oh, and one thing about serving size too. Serving size is very important. I have migraines and I take up to 2 grams of concentrate a day prophylactically, and I couldn't tell you the milligram amount I ingest. I would also think it's interesting that we're trying to restrict the milligrams of cannabis, but people buy handguns with children in their home and are allowed to have them.
Kim Hutchison and Sarah Duff.
Should I go ahead?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm Sarah Duff. I am an owner of Duff Johnson Consulting and Freedom Fighter Farms. I help match patients to growers and also help the patients for the grower. Just a few things. On the tincture labeling, I find it interesting that it says that it has to be for people 21 years and older, but you could be a patient at any age, and in fact, you can be a caregiver at age 18. So I don't know why we would put on our tinctures on the label 21 and over. Am I off base? Okay, cool. I would love to. Okay, and then also, let's see. I want to second everyone with the concentrations. It's definitely going to be an issue for many patients that need to have lots of cannabis, and I know it's hard for people to imagine, but I don't think that 9 or 10 or 11 children should be, those children may have gotten into marijuana on whatever concentrated level anyway, so I can understand that it's great to have a lower level for them, but for the hundreds and thousands of people that really need high doses of cannabis, I don't think we should be worried about just 11 people. Let's see, so also limiting 1 ounce servings for tincture, it's going to be a very problematic thing for people that need to use it throughout the day. That's about 15 to 30 doses. And if somebody is using a tincture to prevent them from having seizures or really for anything, it seems ridiculous to only allow them to have 15 to 30 doses at one time if they use a lot of that in one day. I can use a half-ounce serving in one day myself for migraines. And also I wanted to thank you on page 8 for the caregiver card, the additional caregiver card for organizations. That kind of seems like it would work for processors to be able to help more patients and not just their patients, or they would be able to have more patients if patients would be able to have 2 caregivers. So I do appreciate that, but I do worry, does that allow for those caregivers to be reimbursed? I don't think I see the language in this that allows them to reimburse for either all costs or even just supplies and utilities. So I just wanted to make sure if you all could look at that or maybe insert something. And then I wanted to support the $200 fee for the growers, particularly if they are going to be selling at dispensaries. I think that's a fair cost per patient. Because it doesn't make sense to charge, $6,000 if you're only allowed to have 48 plants maximum, for most growers anyway. But I would love for there to be a lower fee if that's possible for people that are just supporting their patients and not going to dispensaries. One last thing, on page 5, just to reiterate, for the person that is responsible for producing marijuana for a registry identification cardholder, in the definitions is where it mentions that there's an exemption for 2 patient gardens that are personal gardens. I would love for that language to be reiterated on the tracking section on page 27. So that was what I think Senator Floyd Przonski was referring to with that exception for the personal gardens. We just need to reiterate that on the tracking just to make it clear, in my opinion. Thank you.
Sure. Katie Zeno? I might have gotten your name wrong, sorry.
No, you got it right.
Okay, good. And then Lori Duckworth?
My name's Katie Zinno. I'm a patient and a patient advocate. I actually have a couple things. First off, 2 years ago, I was eligible for hospice care. I weighed 220 pounds and was in and out of a wheelchair. I've had 5 brain surgeries and I'm scheduling number 6. Started on the oil. I have 2 jobs now and I'm going back to school. So, from that standpoint, I'm here today to basically bring back the issue. So basically you're saying, when you started off, you said intention versus what's written in the law. Social services told me that when I go back to work, they would tier me off services so that I could successfully be able to support myself. That was what they'd written, that's what they told me. What actually happened was they just cut me off cold turkey, so I ended up with no food, no way to pay for rent, nothing, as soon as I became eligible for work. So when you write a law, not everyone knows the intention in this room particularly, so if it's not passed down properly, that's where these loopholes happen and people get stuck in a catch-22. My entire life has been a catch-22, and I'm trying to stop that. Dosing sizes. I take 3 pounds of cannabis condensed into oil per harvest, plus topicals, edibles. My tolerance is ridiculous, but it's stopping seizures, it's allowing me to work and walk and function and pay taxes. That was the whole point, to go back to school, to be a functioning member of society. We need protection for large quantity consumers. The patients that consume a large quantity of cannabis need an exception to the rule. There is no other option. As you've heard from other people, 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams, that's nothing. That's a Band-Aid on a gushing wound. Right now, DUI blood testing, as far as officers being a licensed doctor and making that recommendation for people that they pull over. Not sure who to talk to about that or where to bring that issue up. Is that here or OLCC? Legislative? Not sure? We don't know? Okay, gotta know. Equality is still the biggest issue right now with patients, recreational, all of it is equality. I can't talk to my doctor can't talk to another patient. There's this battle with just in the community itself. There are patients right now with their kids getting taken away just for having a card. There are patients dying in Eastern Oregon because they're not playing by the rules. 2 patients have died this year because they took away their cards because they don't care about the law written in Oregon. They don't care. They are doing what they want. The court system does not care. I actually wanted a question, oh, I guess you left. I wanted a copy of that story about the 10-year-old that OD'd in Colorado. Tried to look it up, couldn't find it. So if we could get a copy of that, if there's actually proof that that happened.
So Katie, this is 2 minutes, but we'll move on to the next person, but we're going to have a lot of documentation at the next meeting. The documentation that everyone brought up today, we'll make sure to have at the next meeting.
Okay, also wanted to point out real quick, Adderall is one of the most commonly prescribed medications in children. Dosage range from 2.5 milligrams to 60 milligrams. Side effects ranging from drowsiness, lethargy, falling asleep, constipation. These are drugs prescribed by doctors and it's not way worse than cannabis. Sorry, I'm scared. There's a lot of stuff going on. 2 minutes is not enough time to go over it all. Is there a way to...
Yeah, you can submit public comments to the Rules Committee email address.
I'd actually like to talk to somebody, because this affects my life. If I don't get access to my medicine, I'm looking at going backwards. I want to go forwards. This affects me directly. I want to go to college. This is my 4th attempt. I want to work. I want to be a functioning member of society. You guys are literally standing in my way right now. So what do you suggest I do? Because I'm almost out of oil and I can't afford it because now I can't. I have to. What do you suggest I do? Go backwards?
I can move on to the next comment.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone, for all your efforts and all your time. I want to start off with that. My name is Lori Duckworth. My home, my farm, my family are in Medford. I'm the former director of Southern Oregon Normal for 5 years until May 23rd, 2013. I now live up here in Portland because this is where I work. I work for Southern Oregon Alternative Medicine. I'm the manager of the Portland office. We qualify patients for the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program weekly. One thing that I am very concerned about is the decoupling of patients from their growers. The medical marijuana program has successfully shown many other states that it can succeed. My husband and I have been cardholders since the very first year. We were one of the first 500 cardholders. We've seen every change from fees to rules, plant count, everything. It's amazing. The intentions in the legislature last year, and when 91 was voted in by the people of Oregon, was not to change the Oregon medical marijuana program. You all know that. We all know that. You've heard it from all of us, time and time again. Plant counts should not change. Fees should not change unless they go down, that's for sure. How much money did you guys say last week you took from the Oregon medical marijuana program? 5 million? 7 million? Where did it go? Patients on hospice are having to wait to get their actual credentials to go into dispensaries. They're dying before they can go shop because they are 85 days out on getting their cards back, and all they have are their safety packets. They're dying before they can even access their medicine in dispensaries, waiting on papers to be shuffled, that they just went and dropped $450 to go to the doctor to get their card. Safety packets are accepted by law enforcement officers and compliance officers, but not dispensaries for dying patients. Some of them are children. You've talked about concerns about safety for children. How about responsible parenting?
Yes.
I have 4 children. One, my oldest is a prison guard. My next one is a business owner, very successful business. My daughter, she just graduated with 2 degrees, juvenile justice and criminal justice, and she's on her way to becoming one of the top lawyers in Jackson County. And my youngest son is in college for computer science. We raise smart children. We're responsible parents.
Thank you. PK and Marilyn Starr.
I'm PK. I'm with the Mercy Center. I'm a concerned citizen. I'm lucky to tape this program and other programs. When 91 was made up, they said we weren't going to change the medical. We were going to not change the gardens. Fees. Last week you said we had $7 million that we collected. A few years back, we were broken up from the medical to several other programs, and we're taking care of those programs. And you didn't reduce the fees for the patients. Let's see. So is this a medical conference or is this a OLC thing? You're playing with both of them. You are going to play with the medical. Testing. The Department of Agriculture, which tests the corn, the apples, everything else. Cannabis is a fruit. It's a medical thing. It shouldn't be tested by anybody else but the Department of Agriculture. Eating edibles. That was for medical patients. And how does this come into the general public? And when I first started this program, Dr. Phil Lebec was the physician that signed the documents. God rest his soul. Hey, have fun and go fly a kite. See what you're doing. Listen to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Marlon Starr, and I own Mean Green Cream. I am the top of the company. What you have here, I don't understand.
What's up? What you guys got here, I don't understand. What I mean by that is the 2%. Why is it that every single other category is in milligrams, but the topical category is in percentage? What we're looking at here on the 2% is less than 25% THC. The patients and other people that are currently using the topical that I have range from everything from epilepsy to Iraq war vets that are suffering from degeneration of the spine due to sarin gas exposure in Iraq. These people, their only hope is cannabis. At this time, in the VA, when it comes to things like sarin gas and other exposures, the doctors in the VA are throwing their arms up and saying, we don't know what to do, try cannabis. You guys on legislative and rule setting side of things now are making it impossible for anybody to be able to get any sort of positive effects from the cannabis because you're limiting the amount that they can have, at the dosage size, and the concentration. Why are you limiting what is helping people? I am assuming that you at the OHA follow the same rules and standards as medical community of do no harm. You are currently doing harm to the population of Oregon, and it is not right. You need to stop the bleeding of you people looking like fools in the United States. We have the opportunity here to be leaders of an industry, setting an example of what is right. And what you are doing is making it a joke and unavailable. We have hundreds, if not thousands of people that come to this state every single year looking for their last hope when it comes to any sort of medicine or medical hope. You are now taking the last hope away from the people. Is that exactly what you guys intended to do in the first place? Is take away all hope and do harm? According to the AMA, it says do no harm, and you are currently doing harm. Congratulations to each and every single one of you for effectively making the largest black market industry in the United States out of Oregon.
All is well.
Awesome, thank you.
And Scotty Silva, sorry.
He left.
All right, Courtney Moran.
He's gone.
All right, Patrick Caldwell.
Hey.
All right, you may go ahead.
My name is Dr. Paula Noel McPhee. I am an educator at the MS Society of Portland. I teach a healthy alternative lifestyle class to people with multiple sclerosis, which I have. I also have a brain injury from a baseball bat to my head, and I also have PTSD from unlawful imprisonment. So I have a few things, and I'm a single parent with 2 children. So there's many things that I'd like to point out. Just a few of the basic ones, the $200 application fee. I would like to see something like that, income-based on a sliding scale. I'm on Social Security disability income. I make too much money to qualify for food stamps, and I'm not on SSI, so I don't qualify for a lot of things, even though I live on a lower income, less than $26,000 a year. So I would like to see more of an income-based sliding scale, and also for people with SSDI who also have children. I heard something today about CBDs not being included in this universal symbol, which I'll address in a minute. I had a experience of testing products, and I found that a 1-to-1 ratio worked the best for me. And when I used a CBD-only product, all of my MS issues flared up, and I was incapacitated until I got back to the dose of the 1-to-1 ratio. So I feel that anything that's used from a medical plant medicine needs to be labeled, no matter what its ingredient that you're focusing on. I would also like, I'm also a cannabis suppository maker, which delivers 75% of the medicine within 10 minutes. It's a 2,000-year-old technique. So your articles and your statistics from 2000 to 2006, I have to laugh because there is an incredible amount of plant medicine, indigenous science knowledge between 2,000 and 5,000 years old, and your statistics really mean nothing in compared to the vast amount of plant medicine knowledge that is recorded throughout time. The other thing is that it's incorrect to call something a concentrated RSO, Rick Simpson oil. He daily puts out emails and on his website letting people know that it is inappropriate to call it an RSO. He only teaches people how to make it, and I think that calling it an RSO is something that needs to be looked at. The last point that I'd like to make has to do with your language around finding a universal symbol. According to Marimba Ani, who wrote Urugu, an African-centered critique of European cultural thought and behavior, the word universal is a syntax of cultural imperialism. And it says, as Europeans present their culture to the world, they do so consistently in universalistic terms. This representation takes the form of a restless, relentless command to universalize. So when you're looking at a symbol for a plant medicine, why don't you look at what's already there, which is what I as a mother use. It's the symbol of the medical symbol with the two snakes with a pot leaf over it. And that symbol is a universal symbol. If you want to use that word to find something that we can all connect through, is that this is a plant medicine. So if you're going to include Native people and Indigenous people and Western people in this conversation, look at it as a plant medicine and maybe find a symbol that we can all relate to. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Patrick. I work for Green Thumb Industries. I'm a packaging distributor out here in Oregon. My biggest concern is in 333007, if you'd like me to talk about that, I can. Basically, each of the sections, it talks about having specific language for specific items, and that's frustrating because it means 4 labels that I have to produce for each customer, and they'd have to decide which one it is, and it's kind of confusing. I suggested a solution of combining them, sort of because the edible language is pretty similar, but that didn't really work. Long story short, my biggest concern is right now most of the sales in my dispensaries are a gram level of product. They sell them in these little 13 dram pop top containers most frequently. They also have a reverse thread medical container. And I can fit the labeling on this, but Dave left. If somebody were to be making Dave space cakes and selling a 5 milligram brownie, it's just gonna be really, really, really small. And there's no way for me to fit all this language onto the packaging. So that's, you know, it's just kind of a difficulty. I don't really know what to do with it yet. Community people are awesome. My last, shoot, I forgot. I guess that's it. Thank you guys for your time up here.
Edgar Diaz, go with you. And Matt Gompers.
So my name is Bo Levine. I'm from Golden Leaf Holdings, a vertically integrated company here in Portland. Thanks for your efforts and taking the time. I know that this is an iterative process, and it takes contributions like yours to make the program ultimately a success. There's 4 topics I want to go over briefly, and I'll submit written testimony as well. In terms of the fee for a grower, I'm not sure that there's an incremental $200 cost associated with receiving inventories into a dispensary. I know that as we're a dispensary owner. And so I would propose that we cap the fee at $200 for a grower, regardless of the number of patients. In terms of lab sampling, pharma is entrusted to provide their samples into testing facilities. A doctor taking a sample of a cancerous tumor is, that may be helped by medical marijuana is entrusted. So I think it's reasonable to have the proposed a designated person be certified to do that. I'm also an economist, and so I look at numbers, and you know, on the average there'll probably be 800 samples that will be required per day. I'm not sure if the system is built to support that. And this primarily impacts folks in the rural areas, especially in eastern Oregon, where the opt-out you know, has taken place. And you know, those medical dispensaries, you know, are basically on their last leg. In terms of packaging and labeling, having the disconnect between the required January rules and the enforcement on 4.1, I'm not sure if that really makes a whole lot of sense. And it limits the ability for a company to ramp products in the interim. What I would propose is to align the implementation date and the enforcement date to 4.1,
so that there's not this lack of clarity on what the rules actually need to be. For example, I'm my company's compliance officer, and I'm not sure during January through April what rules I'll actually need to have. My company is developing labeling, and so it's difficult in that period. You know, right now the OLCC doesn't have a person hired to review this packaging, and so without the infrastructure in place, it's going to be difficult.
Just turn on.
So thanks again for the time. I'm not sure if the lack of infrastructure right now, even though there's a structure, there's not a person from the OLCC to review the packaging and labeling. And so as a result, it's going to be difficult for companies to deploy products during this period to help the medical or the recreational program. And by not knowing what the actual compliance is or having approval, it's difficult. It basically forces businesses into a non-compliant environment. And then finally, I'd like to propose that the OHA investigate a program such that cannabis companies can contribute to a fund or contribute products for patients who aren't as fortunate as others, so that they will not be as impacted by some of these rules as others. And just one final note is I'm preparing and I'll be publishing soon an equivalency chart for usage, for dosage, mainly for usage, similar to the 1 shot of whiskey equals 1 glass of wine equals 1 beer. I'm planning on publishing that out to show the equivalency of a marijuana cigarette versus an e-pen or cartridge versus an edible. And so that may help educate both regulators and the general public on the usage and the impact of marijuana products. So thank you for your time.
So our next meeting is January 11th. We're getting off of the sort of week-to-week meetings, which will allow us to be a little bit more deliberate about the materials we pull together and give RAC members and the public more time to review them. So we will have materials distributed to RAC members well in advance, as well as being posted on our website. Thank you. See everybody on January 11th.
Thank you.